Bonjour à toutes et tous.
Good morning, everyone. Let me speak French. I am very happy to take the floor today. So please use the button on the side for selecting in the language and for selecting the right volume for your interpretation. And the interpreter hope that you can hear her well. If you can just wave, that would be nice. So in these countries, we have a lot of interpreting languages. We always welcome the interpreters, without whom we wouldn't do much, notably myself, as I don't speak well the other European Union languages. As I said, I'm very happy to take the floor today to open the meeting dedicated to a sensitive, very political topic, i.e. the working time arrangements in Europe. Let me start with what is essential as MEP, member of the Committee of Culture and Education, and also as a citizen. I would like to thank, first of all, the researchers working relentlessly against all odds. Thank you for the quality of your work. Thank you for your patience to discuss with public leaders at a time when facts, scientific methods, and critical doubts are questioned. It is necessary more than ever to tell you that policy and science should go together. This link between knowing and decision have to be protected and deepened. We need you. The topic that gathering us today about the flexible working time arrangements is the fruit of a dialogue between academics, unions, workers, and so on. Behind the flexible term, you have a social reality, social tensions, and issues of society. The flexible working time arrangement is very often a modern response to the evolution of the labor work. Digital term, expectations between private life and professional lives, adapting working time to the needs of employees breaks with a rigid vision of working time. So on paper, it could be rather seducing, but without a real framework, or with a real framework, we could have a real management of private life and professional life, and you could also alleviate the double sanction of women that mainly those are working chores. It could also be a breath for young parents in order to better arrange their working times or the carers for one of their relatives. This can reduce stress, reinforcing inclusion at work and equality. They are positive experiments and they must be recognized. But we also must take a look at the other side of the medal. And it is important. What many studies show, especially those on which your conference are based, these studies, I said, show that flexibility is suffered. And this is what many workers are telling us, as well as unions. Behind the adaptation objective, it's very often the unilateral power of the employers that is applied, and employees have different working time, variable working time, unplanned one. So the balance between private and professional life is getting more fragile, and flexibility is just a way for capital to be more profitable and to accumulate more and more in a widely manner. In France, there were some flexible working time arrangements. We had a very sad example. I was for 20 years a work inspector before I became an MEP, and I can tell you that it was absolutely impossible to organize serious controls of working times and wages. So flexibility becomes a deregulation tool. That means less control on working time, intensification of the workload, increased pressure on time schedules in the morning, at night, weekends, with a direct impact on family life and on the possibility to commit in the association lives, in citizen life, but also on health at work. physical health and mental health, and could be also prone to accident that can be fatal. What can we say when it comes to mental health about the deconnection, right to deconnection in a hyper-connected world? The unions say that without a clear framework, the digital tool becomes invisible change, working at night, answering your emails during the weekend, answering just in case. This is covered under the term flexibility. The union, and they are right, tell us that flexibility should not be a submission, and adaptability should not be at the prejudice of social justice. In the system in which we are working, flexibility cannot become the rules when it comes to working time arrangement. It has to be framed by law. It is a condition of justice. It must be able to be negotiated collectively. It's not one individual that can negotiate their relation to time and work. It's a collective bargaining with representative unions that are enlightened, informed, with protected representatives that can set a balance. That is the balance, the social balance, and then it must be monitored, following the effect on flexibility, on health, on well-being, on equality between men and women, on career paths, and that's why we need research. We need your work, we need your recommendations. What we have to refuse, that's what I feel, that's what I defend as an MEP within this very building. We must avoid a Europe in which social dumping becomes the standard and where flexibility is key. Well, let's be direct. The current forced relations within the EP, because of the elections, the alliances between the right-wing parties, the far right-wing party, are absolutely not favorable to workers' rights. We are still defending a social progress Europe where technological and organizational progress are translated by more justice, more quality of life for workers. I do believe that this is possible, and I am deeply convinced that your conference can contribute to it. I will not be able to stay with you all day today because at noon I must be in Paris for supporting the post workers in their legal action. But my colleague here with me will remain with you, and of course you can talk to her. I wish you very fruitful discussions in order to put the human being at the heart and to make working time an emancipation tool, an empowering tool, and not a submission tool. Thank you very much.
Merci à vous. I let you work. Have a nice day in the Parliament and nice work for your initiative. Thank you. Thank you all.
Well, thank you so much, Mr. Smith. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. We are very happy to present the final findings of this project in this special place. For us, as you know, it's a special opportunity, and my first words is has been very welcome for us, very useful, and of course, Ms. Zoe, it's her support has been very, very nice for us. I should mention Ignacio Salvado. He is the director of the Opera Office in Brussels. His collaboration has been very, very useful, and we appreciate very much your support in this project. Well, my task here is, present some conclusion. However, I would like to mention at the end of my presentation some questions, because we have today a very nice discussion about a very nice topic, very relevant today, for many employees. Then my task here in this first presentation is to show you some findings. However, you will answer my questions, after the meeting, with every speaker, with every speaker. We try. Well, today we present the Innova Working Project. This is a European project. And our team, Innova Working Team, is composed by academy from different universities, from different countries, 6 countries, Spain, France, Finland, Ireland, Hungary, and the Netherlands. And we have a team, a mixed team, because our team is composed by trade unions. Trade unions in Spain. We have the most representative trade union in Spain, UGT and Comisiones Obreras, and we appreciate very much their support in this project. In the project, we have a dual approach, because it's true that it's very new, working time reduction. However, we also analyze flexible working time arrangement, both of them. Then we think it's interesting, this project and our findings, because we can see a link between both of them. No? It's true that working time reduction is more new. However, it's necessary to rethink a working time arrangement, flexible working time arrangement. In the project, in the research, we analyze cases, innovative cases that work. And in addition, we analyze cases, the failure of some cases. Then we have, news for you, very nice for you, and the negative aspect of this case, no, in some cases. It's interesting, our project, because the idea is analyze the impact of those arrangements on conditions, working conditions of employees, health and safety, different working conditions. Our project is based on collective agreement, because, the project is based on the social dialogue. For us, it's very relevant, this kind of regulation. I usually use one definition when I try to explain what is the meaning of a collective agreement in my classes. And I usually mention, well, collective agreement are small laws, but sometimes they include big labor rights. No? Then we try in the research to analyze sector level, but it's difficult. To find innovative cases at sectoral level, and most cases are focused on company level. Well, more issues about our project sectors. It's true that it's easy to find innovative cases in some sectors. For instance, telecommunication, computer programming is very common, remote work, teleworking. However, in our project, we analyze different sectors: manufacturing, constructions, and accommodation and food service activities. For instance, this sector is very relevant in Spain. The Innova Working Project has some milestones. We are very happy because we comply with everyone. We start in November in 2023, and we are finished the project, the research. Today we share with you the main findings. Every delivering country features, case study, comparative report are available on our website. No? And the last issue, the last milestone is our ebook. Ebook is, today we present the ebook for you. The ebook includes 6 cases, very innovative 6 cases, and we have the pleasure because Professor Alexander De Becker will present our ebook. And some findings about our project. Well, it's true that the discussion right now focuses on working time reduction. There are many and very interesting research groups about this issue. However, we analyze, I mentioned before, also flexible working time arrangement. And then in the subject, in the research, we found a link between both of them. In our cases, when we analyze innovative cases in these countries, it's very common that companies try before flexible working time arrangement, and when they work, then they try the second step. The second step is working time reduction. then there is a link. There is a strong link between both of them. In addition, in the research, there is a consensus in the sense that COVID-19 pandemic was the key, remote work for all countries, all employees, most employees. However, we see that after COVID-19, some companies, there is a trend in the sense that companies try employees will be on site again and refuse remote work. In the analysis, in the cases, we can see that where the power of trade union is stronger, then pilot initiatives about remote work, continues. Then the power of trade union is very relevant in this issue. I mentioned before that the research focus on, non-traditional sector where there is innovative cases. For instance, metal industry, we will show some cases about that, very interesting cases in Spain and in different countries. Well, it's true that when we try to assess the innovation in Europe in this topic, it's true that it depends on the collective bargaining system. This is very, very relevant. We analyze 6 countries with different systems, collective bargaining system, and where the worker statute, the public regulation recognize the right to negotiate, collective agreement are protected by the law, then we can find more innovative cases than in a different system. When a collective agreement is not recognized by the law, is not protected by the law, in those cases, the analysis has focused on flexible working time arrangement. However, it's very difficult to find working time reduction. Then there is, a link between this issue, those arrangements, and collective bargaining system. In addition, when we analyze 4-day working week, it's true that it depends on the sector, it depends on the company, the worker profile. However, it's very clear that it means a tool to attract and retain talent. And this is a special issue for some companies. They try to promote those arrangements, working time reduction, flexible working time arrangement, because it's a way to retain the best employees. Even we have found some connection between health and safety and those kind of arrangement. However, it's very clear that those arrangements focus on the organizational power of companies. Then it's necessary the collaboration of companies, because if not, it's the power, it's the traditional power. Then we need companies to implement those kind of arrangements. In the research, we found a bridge between those arrangements and the right to disconnect. We saw that this right is very relevant when companies try to implement those arrangements. It's true that we depend on the technology, high technology, mobile all the time. It means an extension of the working time, and sometimes non-pay, it's free for us. And in the research, we can conclude that the right to disconnect is very, very relevant in this issue. It's true that some countries, for instance, France, the first one, France is the pioneer, and Spain have regulation about that. However, we see that the right to disconnect is not yet, a labor right protected at the European level. And some collective agreement try to negotiate, try to include this right, into the collective agreement. We have some examples in the Netherlands. However, the conclusion, the result is not very good. Some speaker will speak about this issue later. finally, the last slide, or a couple of slides more, we found an ambivalent nature of health and safety. It's true that when some companies implement innovative cases about this issue, well, it means the improvement of mental health for employees, health and safety. However, when companies offer a lot of autonomy for employees, they try to carry out all the objectives, and at the end, it means a risk for him. Then it's necessary to enhance this right, health and safety, and we found some very nice examples in Finland, using, by collective agreement. Then after me, after the lunch, we speaker partners will explain more about those innovative cases and how to implement them. And finally, some final remarks. Today, we hope you find answer about the question: is necessary reduce working hours, promote more flexible working time arrangements? Well, I have my answer. However, I hope you find your answer. But it's very clear in our research that it means some positive effects, attraction of talent, motivation for by business consideration. Then this is a very new thing for some group of companies. And finally, some question for you, for the audience. We hope you find the answer today. What about the levels of innovation in Europe in this issue? What about who promote those arrangement, companies or trade unions? Well, we have some answers about that. What about the degree of collaboration between all levels of collective agreements, sectoral, company policies? There is a very nice collaboration sometimes. And the red question, or one of the red questions for social partners today, what about the organizational difficulties for small companies? How to address them? And the final question, the red color, what is the best way to reduce working hours? Using regulation, public regulation, or using collective agreement, both of them. We have several possibilities, and we hope you enjoy with our today our presentation, our findings, and this is all from on my side. And thank you so much for listening to me. Thank you. I'm not sure if you have questions about preliminary conclusion. No?
Yeah, we've got kind of 10 minutes for questions, if we have all answers to the questions that she put.
after the conference. We continue, no? We continue with the conference? Yes, we continue. We need 2 more.
right names, we never know, and you don't know who is who. I hope that's you. You cannot see it. Yes, that should be you. Can you hear us? Thank you. I have sorry, I dropped already something as usual. It's a great honor to preside this panel with, I've read both of their CVs. I know Jesus before, Agnieszka, I didn't know you before, but with two excellent researchers with an enormous background. Jesus has a career I really envy, being an academic, taking the lead of so many projects, and in the meantime developing in his hometown and in his home country the law faculty of one of the biggest universities in Spain. So we can only pay tribute to those achievements, but those achievements are not enough, because today he will take also he will speak to you about the issues which he found out of the research, and anyway, it will richen our debate. Agnieszka, you're a researcher at one of the institutions based here, European Trade Union Institute, with an excellent tradition in research, very well known. So without any doubt, every research you have done must be useful for this. I've read parts of what was the outcome. You will be an excellent collaborator of this panel, I'm sure. Now I'll grant the floor to Jesus first. I have to indicate that I have to be quite strict on the time, so I'll grant you both 15 minutes to speak, and then we'll leave the floor to the audience for some questions. Jesus, please.
Muchísimas gracias, Alexander. Buenos días a todas y a todos. Un placer.
Good morning to everyone. It's a sheer pleasure for me to be here at the European Parliament. It's an honor to be here this morning, where the voice of people is heard. And thank you to everyone who's made this event possible. Thank you to Madam Professor Munoz for her amazing work. Thank you for your professionalism. It's always a great honor working with you. I also want to thank Ignacio Salvado, who has helped us here navigating through this European bubble. I also want to thank Anthony Smith and all the professors of all the universities who have contributed to this project. And you are true friends. I also want to thank the social partners who have made this project possible to carry it forward. And today we are delighted to present it here at this August Assembly of the European Parliament. Thank you also to Alexander, obviously, for this presentation. And it is a pleasure to be here with Agnieszka to talk about working time. I will try to abide by these rules and stick to the 15 minutes speaking time. I think that worrying about time stems from the fact that we human beings, we are time to live. We have a limited time on Earth, and as a consequence, worrying about time makes sense. It's quite reasonable. We need to worry and think about how we distribute time through life. It's also key and has been studied through philosophy. Time is a defining element of structure. If we are worried about time we have to live, well, as a consequence, well, working time is part of this time, and it worries us as well, because working time is time we don't have for ourselves. It's time for someone else. And so one way or another, we are selling this time to someone else. And Professor Alonso Leon talks about it in his theories about time. And yes, it makes sense. We are worried. Working time is a key element nowadays. It is a pivotal issue in all countries throughout Europe. In Spain, we are worried about time, our relationship with time. How should we answer to the new needs taking into account the different changes that are happening nowadays with the new distribution of time. There are several changes, but here I would like to focus on the changes that are intertwined with IT, with the digitalizations. But there are many changes that go hand in hand. There are also changes related to the work culture. Back in the day, work was the cornerstone of life for people, but today things have evolved, and so the work culture is still key, but things have shifted. Then on another level, there is climate change, and climate change has an impact on several elements, and this year, congresses have focused on that as well, and there are other topics as well. And so IT obviously is pivotal here. Technology and time haven't always gone hand in hand. There has been a certain kind of variation when machinery arrived, and in 1850, all human beings would spend more or less 60% of their time for work, but things have evolved, and since then, there has been some kind of reaction throughout the last century, and we all have read The Right to Laziness from 1860 has shown that people have tried to find answers vis-à-vis time and technological evolutions, because this time should lead to more well-being. And so this question has been accompanying us for quite some time now. And a few years later, Keynes has mentioned in the 1930s at a conference in Madrid on the future of our grandchildren that, in 2030, according to him, we would work 3 hours, up to 3 hours a day and 15 hours top per week. But those prophecies, actually seem to be at the opposite of what we are going through today. Back in the day, we imagined that technology would have an impact, but we imagined that working time would evolve naturally a certain way. But, we can see that today things are very different from what we had imagined. And as a consequence, all the institutions related to work need to think about this. We have this new production system. There are productivist organisms that are working 24/7. And today we also have AI, we have robotization, we have the development of big data, the Internet of Things, ITC, and other ways of producing. And the fact is that the reality of working time, needs to take into account these new realities that are intertwined with these transformative changes. These new ways of producing are organisms that are living and conveying new consequences that we need to take into account when we analyze time. And time paces up as well, and changes pace up. And we need to take this into account. The transformations in production from the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, had a certain pace, and they entered into the lives of people through years' time. I'm thinking about radio technology, about phones, and all society was impacted by this, but through years' time. Nowadays, the transformations are almost instantaneous, and the impact is just huge. The clear example I have in mind, is, for example, the one of Netflix. Netflix arrived to the users very quickly, whereas Netflix needed 3 years for 1 million, but ChatGPT, in 5 years' time, it reached millions of users. And if we take DeepSeek, the latest Chinese AI, it goes even faster. All of this to say that time paces up the same way that that transformations and technological transformations pace up. As a consequence, we need to take into account, well, those integral changes. We are facing many other changes, and the conception of working time is also evolving, and the statuses of working time are also shifting. The legal framework for working time is evolving, and day after day, as Anna has said, well, the right to not having working time, pauses, breaks are key. And this work, which is an integral right and an integral framework, needs to be taken into account. And the legal framework of tomorrow will be the one of work and of not working at the same time, because both will go hand in hand, and we will need some kind of legal safeguard to make sure that there is health, physical and psychological health at work and outside of work as well. So how should we rethink all of this? How should we rethink time? What is being done? Well, I think there are many fields to explore. I don't have much time, and so I won't dig into details, but here you have some key elements. First, there is the auto-management of working time and the control on this auto-management. This is essential to me. There is a certain trend to individualize time management. We can see this, namely with some frameworks related to remote work. We see there is this management by the remote worker himself, themselves. And so we also need to rethink part-time working. There is this digital technological transformation of work, and as a consequence, well, today part-time working worries because there is sub-employment, because in some countries, namely in Spain, well, people work part-time because they cannot do any other way, and as a consequence, we need to take into account the new realities when we talk about these elements. When we talk about the regulation of work and remote work, but we need to bear in mind the fact that the regulating frameworks are anchored in the past. And for tomorrow, we need to take into account the new realities. In Spain, the legal framework says that it is possible to reorganize the use per industries, or because of some extraordinary consequences, the working time, but today with the digital control systems we have for work time, we need to reshuffle everything and to think about, well, the legal frameworks and how all of this needs to be reorganized, bearing in mind the different tools. We need an integral tool and an integral development of working activities. I also think that we need to think about AI, how to use it also for time management. AI tools and can become a new field for time management and for business management as well. And we need control systems that are developed consciously in that sense. Then the work through platforms is extremely interesting as well, because platform work is nothing exceptional anymore. This will be a fundamental model tomorrow. And as a consequence, we need to focus on regulating working time through platforms. This is an essential topic we will have to focus on. Then, another point is more and more important to several companies. The times that can be picked, if you wish. Workers should have an envelope of hours they have dedicated to work, and so some people are talking about 4 days, 4 hours long days, but we need to think deeply about the new realities. And in conclusion, today, well, we are facing demographic changes, and time will have an impact. I don't know if we've thought things thoroughly, but working time, the changes of shifts might happen through life as well, depending on the age of workers. And youngers may have to work longer, and so we should need maybe some kind of circularity, people working more at one point and then less, depending on the life cycle of people, of workers. Because, well, our life expectancy is becoming longer and longer, fortunately. And finally, in conclusion, as my comrade Professor Dodderly has said, well, has said about, well, different algorithms, we need a collaborative time management, working time management. I think that IT implies the voice of social partners, implies exchanges, implies looking for joint solutions. Time management, hand in hand, is essential. It's a cornerstone, I say. And all voices need to be heard: the state, the social partners, the trade unions, the voices of business and entrepreneurs. We are facing a challenge, and as a consequence, since we have this magnitude ahead of us, we need to work hand in hand, integrated in an integrated manner. It is true. There is a huge debate nowadays on sharing work time, on reducing work time on a daily basis. But I think we need to think about the forest behind the tree. If work time is a pie, well, this pie is fluctuating, becoming smaller and bigger, depending on different criteria, namely productivity. If productivity increases, well, the pie becomes smaller. And so even if we make the pie smaller and smaller, I don't know if everyone will be able to taste the pie. As a consequence, what about those who won't have the possibility to get a bite out of this pie? How can we manage these situations? These are essential questions, and I am intimately convinced that digital transformation should allow for more social cohesion and not fragmentation. This is the essential challenge to me. Then, historic questions are still very timely today, and here, one which is related to prophecy. A prophecy mentioned by Lafargue or Keynes as well, and those 15 hours long working week. Tomorrow's world is full of uncertainties. We don't know what will happen with IT. There are many question marks. And some 15 years ago, there was this huge success from unemployment to leisure. And so basically, it's just a step, a transformation. But how does it happen? Then we have Byung-Chul Han, a famous author who has written about society of leisure. And he has this last book about no things. And we are about to be replaced by Homo ludens, but this transformation means that we need to rethink several elements. And this is my conclusion. There are all these transformations that are happening now in working institutions, in culture, in the way we produce. These transformations are such that working time, that work in all its dimensions, needs to be analyzed thoroughly. And therefore, I want to thank Ana Belén Muñoz for her invitation to these reflections, to these days, and to be part of this project. I think that this allows us to analyze many questions. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you very much also for respecting the delay. I propose that we continue to the next speaker, and then afterwards we'll collect some questions from the audience. Agnieszka, you have prepared your speech. You have 15 minutes as the other speakers. I grant you the floor.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you for being here. And we've heard about changes in working time that are driven by the technological change, by different transformation on the society level. So in my talk, I would like to take stock of the complexity and try to order it somehow. So find some order in the chaos. Hopefully there will be some. And the reason is that if we want to try to find effective responses and solutions to what is happening now, we really need to understand what are the underlying dynamics in working time, in the work organization, and then devise the strategies that actually target the problems so that we don't risk overlooking some of the emerging dynamics that may lead to future changes in working time and affect workers. So I will mostly focus on the impact of technology on working time. And technology is one of those very broad terms that I think warrant unpacking just to begin with. So we talk about automation. That's one of the huge transformations that technology brings. Automation of tasks, so some work is performed by machines or robots, but also of HRM functions. So management of people becomes automated. We have algorithmic management to different degrees between this being done by actual AI or just more automated with the aid of computers. The AI is a huge topic. It's not just the use of ChatGPT, it's the use of many tools that help assist workers in performing cognitive tasks, but also AI is produced by people. This is the whole supply chain of workers, quite often in low-income countries, that perform work through platforms, that was already mentioned, and that's data annotation, data classification. It's completely under the radar, but it is also the outcome of technological change. Then we have people working with the digital technology, so the products of the tech industry. Remote work, which was mentioned, is quite often digitally mediated. And then platform economy, which started as a very small niche in the labor market with just some sectors, but the tools and the logic of organizing working time are indeed spreading. So if we then try to understand what those broad areas of technological change, what they bring to the work organization and employment relations, we see that they affect tasks and jobs that are becoming more and more fragmented. We have non-standard employment forms. We have also tasks that are increasingly tiny defined, because if they are managed by the machine, they need to be computational, so to say. Skills, autonomy of workers is also hugely affected. Then the work process becomes datafied, and that's a quite important development. So everything gets turned into numbers, it's chopped, it's standardized, increased surveillance that also impacts autonomy. Working environment is changing quite profoundly for people who work with technology that goes out of the computer. It is the wearables, it's assisting them in everyday life. And then voice. We do focus on collective bargaining, on workers' voice in this conference and in this project. Voice is being challenged not only because many workers their work is removed from site, from the centralized workplace, but also many of the provisions that target technological innovation, they try to redefine what voice or representation is about. We see the right to information and not really the right to consultation or collective bargaining in many areas. So that all of that then translates or transposes somehow into the working time. It does impact how working time is organized. So now to zoom in on working time as the object of our consideration, it is very useful to try to imagine how working time was changing in history, so that we can then better understand where we are now and what past trends are then translating into what we see as the developing working time model. So when we go a bit back in history to the pre-industrial society, work was mostly defined by task. So how long it takes to perform a task, to produce a shoe, to produce some amount of food, that's the amount of work you need to perform. That was quite easy. And in the condition of free labor, workers had quite a bit of autonomy in deciding then when the task is performed, when the product needs to arrive to the client. Then moving on to the industrial society, the first huge change in time, in the logic of organizing time happens because the time starts to be counted by the clock. So the work is no longer the product, it is the amount of time people sit in the centralized workplace. And that was a simple need to coordinate and synchronize the work of masses of people. It was much harder to synchronize craftsmen by telling them, okay, perform this small task. It was much easier to say, okay, you sit here from 8 until, well, that was changing. At some point it was until, let's say, 5 p.m. And then the employer, the manager, organizes the activity, brings all of the activities to that slice of time that is purchased from the worker. And the inefficiency and the slowdown, it is at the expense of the employer. People are really concentrated in the labor of humans is concentrated in the block of time. Then we move to the 20th century and increasing fragmentation and flexibilization of time. We see the departure from the concept of continuous standard blocks of time as the currency, as the contractual exchange between workers and employers. Time is also increasingly adjusted. So it's now possible to have a worker hired just to perform a shorter task. We have emergence of zero-hour contracts again. So it is a contractual arrangement. It's not based on a task as it was before, but it's based on an hour of work in the morning, such as in the supermarket, for instance, and then the 2 hours of work in the evening. So then the logistics sector follows the same logic. When the demand arises, the workers are matched with their labor time to that need, to that the fluctuation or peak in demand. And in this context, we see the emergence of the digitally mediated or algorithmically managed work. So the technological change, I would say it's not the next step. It's really unfolding, drawing on all the elements that we saw in the history of development of working time. It is, on one hand, again, just to group it, it's quite complex what is happening with working time, but the two tendencies I would see as prevailing. On one hand, this is the fragmentation, the last step that I saw on steroids. So the working time is atomized, is punctuated, is just chopped much more because algorithmic management or automated management makes it possible to simply compute and organize increasingly small units. So the optimization in this sense can go much farther than it was when the zero-hour contract was planned by the shop floor manager, for instance. Also, the transaction costs decrease, such as in the platform economy, so people can be really hired on very unstable fissured contracts, and the management of that is just possible thanks to technological platforms. But on the other hand, the parallel process is the extension of availability. We heard the intuitions when we talk about the blurring of boundaries, when we talk about right to disconnect. So the notion of actually spend much more time at work is something that I think we share, and that surfaces in a lot of research. Because if we want workers, well, not we, it's a figurative we, the economy wants workers to perform those scattered activities, somehow those workers need to be there. They need to be available. And the easiest picture I can offer you is the food delivery worker waiting for the order. So the orders come in those very short intervals. They are quite tiny, low paid, but the worker needs to be there to wait and be available to pick them up. So what does that mean for working time reduction? On one hand, we see that the optimization, the matching, the chopping of time leads to shorter working time. But on the other hand, workers spend much more time being available for work. I think I don't have time to go into much detail into the processes that lead to those two dynamics, but I think it's worth emphasizing that this is, so the fragmentation of tasks is also happening by excluding, so excluding many activities from paid labor. So the time between tasks can be shortened. You can think of Amazon warehouse workers who are timed when they go to the toilet. So again, technology and surveillance make it much easier to just really optimize the allocation of time and tasks across workers. And importantly, this is not something that is developing in a small pockets of the labor market. When we looked at the EU data, representative for all workforce, irrespective of the sector, to EU 27 countries, collected by Eurofund, its European Working Conditions Survey, we see the evidence of that across everyone. So it plots the influence of computer on work on the horizontal axis, and the greater the influence of computer on a person, the more work at short notice happens and the work becomes more intensive. So we do see those developments already on the aggregate. Now the second dynamic which I mentioned, which is the extension of availability, it's happening because digitalization puts pressure on workers, and it puts it through various channels. I think they are key for understanding as the next step for then devising regulation. Individualization of the employment relationship is one powerful dynamic. We see that in self-employed workers, in those independent contractors that are not truly in control of their work and employment conditions. Platform workers, when they were asked, so you have flexible work, you could just spend an hour, for instance, working when it's convenient for you. Why do you overexploit yourself? You work 24/7. And then they said, yes, but because the system is constructed in a way that I feel guilty when I'm not working, because I could be screening the tasks. Perhaps I'm missing out on some really well-paid tasks. So the way this is constructed, the digitally mediated allocation of task or paid work, entices workers to invest more time. There is the autonomy paradox as well that was written about extensively, that if people are offered this notional autonomy, but they don't have resources or the securities that come with stable income, they have the tendency for the self-inflicted excessive hours of self-exploitation. Then performance of many work-related tasks is moved outside of the paid labor. So time management, it is a job to be a manager, and now workers need to quite often manage their own time. Health and safety management is also very often put on workers. That's also a bit intuition in the Platform Work Directive. So the worker needs to then assess themselves if the conditions are hazardous or endangering the safety of the person. That used to be a separate job. Now it's moved on one worker. And then the blurring of the boundaries, which is quite obvious, that we just carry the devices with us all the time. So it's difficult to disconnect, and some hours, despite being there's possibility for them to be recorded, they are actually quite often not recorded. And again, the same data, when we try to see whether this extension is something that's happening on the aggregate, we see that in the data. So work in free time to meet work demands, it's the first chart. It is increasing quite substantially when workers are influenced by the computer. And then the work-life balance. So the question is whether working hours fit with family or social commitments, that declines substantially. And these analyses, they both control for the sectoral composition, age, and some other worker characteristics. So just to finish off, we do see this shortening of time, but it is the paid time that is shortening, not the time dedicated to work. This is a very nice chart that shows the increase in part-time work. The red line, the top line, is the proportionate increase in part-time over the last 2 decades, and then the full-time. It's much less dynamic, and the part-time is growing mostly faster for men than for women. So it is a business strategy. There is a need to have people available in non-standard and shorter hours, but with part-time we know that the cost is footed by the worker entirely. And full-time hours, when we separate both full-time and part-time, we see quite a bit of stability first over time in recent period and across countries. This is EU 27 full-time working week. It is remarkably similar, and it doesn't show signs of being 15 hours as Keynes promised us it should be in 5 years. So, and all that unpacking was really to better address the policy challenges. And this is my last point. I'm not going to read through all those small issues, but in the negotiation on working time, it is really important to realize the effort and the reward sides of the bargain. And the effort is not really just the number of hours. So it's not really counting, is it 8 per day, is it 7? But when bargaining on working time, regulating working time, we need to also be aware what is the number of tasks people perform, pace of work, whether breaks are removed or not, what about ergonomic issues, scheduling, unpaid overtime, or whether, for instance, people, if the working time is shortened but the activity is not reduced, whether people need to use leave days, personal leave days, to then just recover from this really intense pace. And that leads us to much more informed policy decisions, or much more targeted, sorry, I think that's the better word. So indeed, focusing on the barrier between work and life, the right to disconnect, ensuring individual control of workers over their time, data collection about the work process. That's an important issue because the data about the work process are used to manage how and when people perform their work. Granularity of working time. In Belgian legislation, there is this provision that you cannot, as an employer, purchase time of shorter than, I think, 3 hours. We have experts here, thank you. Right, so already this intuition that you can chop it further potentially, but buying time in 20-minute slots would just create a horrendous situation. Ensure correct classification of employment relationship and recognize that many activities that are perhaps not counted towards the standard hours are still performed by workers and they form integral part of their work. So yes, I stop here. Thank you very much. And this is some further reading. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for both of the presentations, both also respecting the time delays perfectly. So I cannot complain and can only congratulate the contributors. I'll leave the floor to you and whether you want to address some questions, queries, which you might have after this interesting and sometimes provocative presentations. Yes, Mina.
So thank you very much. I'm Minna van Gerven. I'm part of the Innova working team from the University of Helsinki. And I'm really excited that we talk about digitalization. It's also one of our core business nowadays. But I was wanting, so you Agnieszka, you nicely put out the policy challenges and also Professor Mercader, no, something like that, sorry. Professor Jesus. But basically, my question is, so what are then the policy options? So where should we start trying to fix these issues, if they are? Of course, there is this question, is it about regulation? Or is it about we should go with social dialogue structures? Or what is the policy option or options that we should focus on when we are trying to deal with this? Because it is also the part of the questions is relating to that we know that digitalization affects those who are the most vulnerable, and their protection through these means and channels are already being seen in other kind of challenges also not meeting the criteria, I would say. So what are the policy options here? Thank you so much.
Dagmar.
My name is, am I on? My name is Dagmar Schiek. I'm also part of the Innova Working Project for University College Dublin. I was really fascinated how those two speakers developed the same issue of the digitalization not always leading to more autonomy, but rather leading to an extent in work-related time, while to a degrees of the paid time. And I think we need to take another element here, which was really front and center in our Irish case study, which is the time to get to work. So our subject, the people we talked with were really struggling with getting to work in a country where there's no housing and no public transport, and then remote working while having all the negative aspects, which Agnieszka and Jesus properly realized. still has an advantage. And that needs to be governed as well. So we need to look into the time committed to work. That needs to be a new category, not just for work time regulations, but also for collective bargaining.
Any further questions? Yeah.
Now is it working? Okay, thank you. So I listened very carefully, and I was thinking that there is this quote that someone said that we are shifting from the century of work to the century of leisure time. And I mean, whether, however, the freed up time is used by the worker, anyway, it's good because it reflects a bigger recognition of the human being himself out of work. But I was also thinking this might also reflect a crisis in a work which is really identitarian, and made of shared values. I was thinking that maybe the fact that workers want to reduce the working time as maximum, of course, is positive and it reflects a bigger a recognition of the human being. But also, I think this could be seen as a part of a work which is seen only as a good to be sold on markets, and on which you get the best for you if you manage to sell it for the bigger price and the less time. Maybe we are missing, and I really would like to know from you, the policies which enhance also the participation, the collaborative models in which workers can really recognize themselves and feeling to collaborate to some shared objectives. Thank you.
I propose, Agnieszka, if you agree, that we take the first and the third question together because they're both towards policies oriented, and I grant you the floor to answer. Please, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the questions. With the last point, I think that's a very interesting comment, and I would just add some context. It might not be just the workers wanting to work shorter to dedicate time to leisure. I think it's not just this trade-off, but we have the change in the model of the family where there's the dual earner emergence of the couple where both people work, and it's just really incompatible to have two full-time jobs that require commuting time that then it's difficult to disconnect from them. Then you have to also add some other tasks that are not part of the day and still have a family or take care of children. So I think it's also I wouldn't put leisure as the goal, but just really make it manageable to really have also private and family life. So just a bit of the context, but I think that's very important, what you said. And then the question, so where are the policy options? That's a very good question. It's $1 million question. And I think I wanted to make the point that it's not just focusing on the duration of the time and hoping that everything will be solved. It's very important, but it should be accompanied by measures such as, indeed, the right to disconnect, the increasing autonomy of workers, the self-determination, which collective bargaining and social dialogue are really instrumental in achieving, so that the workers have the say. It's not done top-down with the disregard for how the tasks are organized or allocated. And indeed, it's the income is a very important part of the equation, especially when you talk about working time reduction. So safeguarding the level of income, but also ensuring that it's decent enough so that people do not take up another paid activity, that they're not forced to dedicate the free time from one job to another. And in countries with better working conditions or higher wages, we see that it's not happening. So it's a very positive example. Having a Friday off or one day off in the pilots of working time reduction doesn't lead to people taking up additional paid employment. It's really invested in family, in self-development, or in some more greening activities. And then I think there was a question about, the time to work, but we can deal with that.
I'll give it to you.
Yeah, exactly.
I made a sort of repetition. So the time devoted to work, because it was part of your presentation, which was the question of Dagmar. I thought perhaps I'll let Jesus the floor to answer.
Muchísimas gracias, Alexander. Muy brevemente, contesto a las tres cuestiones.
All right.
El tema de la gestión política del tiempo. intervención. Creo que aquí hay que partir de un principio que probablemente sea un justo equilibrio entre la ley.
So we need a just balance between social dialogue and the evolutions. And so we need to intervene in different contexts, and we need guarantees for some supervision from workers. But on the other hand, I understand that for me, well, social dialogue and social dialogue is necessary, and we need to be able to adapt to the different transformations that will happen. Everything that has been said here has been extremely interesting, namely everything related to the time we need to commute, because commuting is also time used for work indirectly. It's time we use for work, and so qualifying this time is necessary as well, because commuting is also time dedicated to work. And the EU interprets this a certain way. And I think that we will need to continue working and thinking about this, namely in Spain. And commuting time is a time that is also being analyzed by the Supreme Court, and their decision will be paramount. Then there is an issue of a market for working time that seems to emerge, and this could be extremely interesting as well. I think that this is interesting but worrying as well. I think that Professor Agnieszka, during her presentation, she said it about platform workers, and this reminds me of what we've said about the Congress in Spain this year, because Professor Aguirre mentioned it, and there is the issue of auto self-exploitation. And sometimes, indeed, there is exploitation, but also sometimes self-exploitation when people are so tired. And so on the labor market, the state tends to provide a certain legal framework, but we need to think beyond it, because there are also external factors that need to be taken into account. And this is it for me.
And unfortunately, this session, I think it was of great value, and I think both of the presenters. May I just take the floor to grant you a question which is in my mind since months and months, and which I just want to share with you because you're all into labor law. It's, if we're speaking, and I didn't see it, is about the right to deconnection, shouldn't we, from a health and safety point, also not take into account that we should prevent people to become addicted to these digital issues? We all look the entire time to our phones and to our computers, and we all get addicted. And I think it's also a part which should be mentioned and which might lead to further research. I'm sorry that I took the floor just to grant this idea, and I step back now. Thank you very much for your attention.
So coffee break here now. The coffee is here at the entrance, and just use your time to network with everyone. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Nice sound. Yes. Okay. I want to thank, in the first place, the organizers for organizing this conference. It's a brilliant conference, especially to my colleague Ana Belén Muñoz. I also want to thank all the other colleagues in the project. I think we have done a very good. You have done a very good job. I'm not included in this. Congratulations. And thank you, everybody, for attending also. We have a very special session now in this conference, which is the opinion of the protagonists of labor relations, social partners. So we have a good representation here of business associations to my left and trade unions to my right. And I think we have representatives from the main Spanish business organizations, COE, which is mainly big companies, and CEPIME, which is mainly small and medium-sized companies. And then we have representation from the main Spanish trade unions, UGT and Comisiones Obreras, and a representation from the European Trade Union Congress, ETUC. So I think social partners are well represented here in this table, and I'm looking forward to a great discussion in which we don't have much time. That's true, because we only have 15 minutes for 5 people, so 10 minutes each, more or less. But we have some time for questions from the audience at the last 5-10 minutes of this hour. And we have structured this discussion around a number of questions. So my first question, and I think that maybe unions can take this first question first, is where is the social demand for the reduction in working hours? So for instance, in terms of demographics, does it come mainly from young people, from older people, from high salary earners, from low salary earners? Where's that demand? Let me change now to Spanish, because most of the people here in this table is Spanish people, so I will turn to Spanish now. O sea que la primera cuestión que os quiero plantear.
So the first question I want to ask is to the trade unions. Where is this social request for time management and splitting? How do you see this on the field? What's the request? Is this the main request when it comes to working time?
Quien quiera.
Who wishes to take this question?
Bueno, pues buenos días.
Well, hello to you. I am from Comisiones Obreras. So we have always had this demand for people who work, and the surveys in Spain have shown, namely today in Catalonia, that this is a request from all society, and that relies on 3 key elements, and there are 3 groups of people requesting this. First, there is one group, women. Women because of very direct reasons. Women are submitted to a double shift. They have all the care. Then there is a second group, and it is becoming clearer and clearer, and I think that pandemics made things go faster, namely youngsters who are overqualified. The pandemic has had a huge impact because, well, they don't see work as work used to be seen back in the day. And as a consequence, there are many questions related to the use of time in our society, and this has led to major transformations. And there is the third group that is key. Namely, when we talk about, well, brain drains, the most qualified staff today is not requesting for more working time. From the experiences we've seen in our working, we see in Hungary and so on and so forth that they don't want more working time. And so qualified staff, youngsters and women want this shift. Microphone, please. So, in the name of UGT, our trade union, I want to thank Ana Belén for her work and for giving us the possibility to share our opinion as social partners here with UGT. I'm also delighted to have the possibility to take the floor in Spanish here, because I took the floor in English in Madrid, and here I have the opportunity to speak in Spanish, and this is wonderful. Finally, someone may understand me, jokes aside. To us, well, the legal evolutions and the need to be related, well, to the reduction of working time, but also to 3 elements I want to refer to here. One, well, the reduction of working time, but then there are two other elements, as I have said. Elements that may be more important than working time. First, the right to deconnection. And in Spain, we need to have a clear register of working days. Then, as Raul has said on statistics, we will have to define the roles of everyone. And it has already been said, and a survey was already published and said that 72% of voters support the reduction of working days. But beyond all of this, 3 out of 4 youngsters are worried by the right to deconnection, the right to disconnect, because we've seen the labor market evolving. We've seen how services are now provided. And we see that today this right is more demanded inclusively than this right to reducing working days. We need some kind of safety and safeguards on this matter. Furthermore, and aligned with this, we need to take into account all the hours related to work, and they need to be compensated for. When we talk about Spain, this is essential. It is unacceptable to see in Spain, for example, to have 6 million extra overtime every week, out of which 3 million are not paid for and do not contribute to, well, the national budget through taxes. And we need to do something there. No one likes to work for free. 100% of workers want to be compensated for what they do. And on this matter, I'm convinced that we can agree on several elements, namely with the employers and their organizations. I am convinced that on these two matters, the matter of reducing working time, there we may have more debates, but on these two other matters, i.e. The right to disconnect and then registering correctly and loyally all the working hours, well, there we can agree and find pathways forward.
Yes, indeed, we are noticing the same thing as my trade union colleagues already talked about. And looking at collective agreements and different demographics groups, indeed, what we can see is that working time is the second most, after, of course, the wages, the most frequent provision that we are addressing in collective bargaining agreements. So the trade unions, the employers, they do care about working time because indeed, it is a relevant topic for all different groups of workers because, of course, it's related to work-life balance. It's related to reducing stress. It's related, of course, to having equal access to time. It's related to family obligations, care for learning, but also it's related to the ability to engage in society beyond work as well. So what we are noticing is that, among the demographics, for sure, it's young people. Young people who are nowadays more flexible and who are not willing to sacrifice their well-being anymore to be overworked, to face this stress. And what we're seeing now is that it's a lot of young people who are facing burnout already at the age of 30, which is very worrying, of course, not only for their mental health, but for the whole labor market. If we're having a labor market when you can face burnout at the age of 30 already, I think that we as a whole society should be very worried. So it's for sure young people who are having this demand, who wants to have more healthy balance in life. Then we also see that, yes, also in low-paid workers, they are also asking for shorter working hours. But looking at them, the main demand that goes along with it, it's of course that it needs to be combined with guaranteed wages. So they are calling for working time reduction with full pay. And this is what we're standing as E2UC as well, that yes, if we're talking about working time reduction, the payment has to be secured as well. It doesn't mean that you work less and you get paid less, because then this is basically part-time work. And yeah, talking about part-time work, I would very much agree with the gender dimension. So again, we see more and more women who are taking more and more care and domestic work responsibilities, because this is still not equally distributed. And a lot of women are actually in involuntary part-time employment. Not necessarily because they wanted to, but because this is what they're offered, or this is the only way they can combine all of the responsibility they have in society. From our perspective, yes, at E2UC we are following this demand very strongly, and we are very impressed about the development of this dossier, because working time reduction, it's already happening. It's happening in different countries, it's happening in different sectors, at the company level, at the sectoral level. There are many collective agreements that are already including those provisions. And just now, in last weeks, we have made a new study on working time reduction in collective agreements. We have provided you also this QR code, and the study is already available, and next week we're launching a new event and launching this study, where we can see clearly how this trend is becoming more and more visible among different types of workers, and hopefully it's going to inspire all different companies to think about it as well.
Bueno, en primer lugar, muchísimas gracias.
So first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. I'm delighted to be here, and thank you for this initiative. Thank you to Innova Working for this amazing project. We think that there is no such request to reduce below 37.5 hours in Spain. This came from elections, and this was part of political agenda, and it looks like many people try to be convinced of the importance or the need to have 37.5 hours, but we don't think this is something coming from the roots. We think that this comes from the top of the pyramid, in Spain at least. Then we think that here we talk about a legal framework, and this is quite something. You know, we are in favor of social dialogue. We have many conventions coming from the roots, from sectors, from companies defending this. The insurance industry, the finances defend such things. And we think we should do this because companies and employers and social partners are free to decide what is the best thing to do at one given moment, at one given context, taking into account that Spain has so many different faces. We need to take into account all the realities in our countries. We shouldn't have one clear model. And ILO, by the way, same as the EU, and as the Vice President of the European Commission have always said that nothing should be imposed, but that everything should always stem from social dialogue. Nothing should be imposed by public authorities or governments. Therefore, we think that collective agreements are necessary and that we need to study the different contexts. How will SMEs be impacted in Spain? Because I do represent them. I do represent micro companies as well. You know, when things are good, and things are good for micro companies in Spain, well, we have lost 33,000 workers in micro companies, while huge companies have gained over 300,000 workers. You know, Spain is a huge country, and we think it is important to try to save those micro companies who are at the core of some industries, and we cannot have a magic wand that would try to impose a monolithic solution, a norm stemming from the government that would leave many behind and that would worsen the situation for so many of them. The last study from the Bank of Spain has shown that many are suffering losses, and we think that such measures would lead to many increased costs, and this would be an extremely negative impact. And then when it comes to women, and I am a woman, allow me to say that the solution go through co-responsibility. I think that here in the end the issue we are facing is that care are resting on the care is resting on the shoulders of women, and we are always taking more care of people, and this is nothing good when we try to strive for gender balance and gender equality. Then youngsters, well, we need to tell them it is good to work. You know, I am happy to be here and it is good for my personal development. I am delighted to be here. I don't think this is anything bad. I think this makes me very happy to be here with you. This is an opportunity for personal growth, and we need to share this message with the youngsters, because through activity, to professional activities, through work, we can empower ourselves, we can flourish and find happiness. You know, I am delighted by my work. It makes me happy. I'm also obviously made happy by leisure, but we need both things in life.
Pues gracias, Paco.
Thank you, Paco. First of all, again, I want to thank Belén for this amazing project. Jesus, it's a pleasure to be here with you. Hats off to you. It's a beautiful day, and even though this project might be reaching its end, I'm happy to be here with Angela, because she was named chairwoman not that long ago, and I'm happy to be here with my my comrades here, with whom we sometimes spend days and nights, because we've had many social dialogues lately, especially since the pandemic. Some of these agreements are really worth gold, but to reach them we need social dialogue. And we need to protect all parties here and have this process that allows to reach something on these questions that we need to tackle together hand in hand, namely here at the European Parliament. I also want to say I'm very happy to be here. Then Paco, regarding your question.
Dentro a las grandes, a Cepime, a ATA.
We have the multinationals, the big companies, the SMEs, and the micro businesses as well. And so you asked if there was a social request or demand to legally reduce the working time. Well, this should be based on some true studies, because obviously if you go in the street on the streets and you say, do you want to make the same amount of money and work less? Well, obviously people will say yes, but we need more objectivity. And here I would say that the facts, supposed facts, could be debated on. In Spain, we have 90% of industries that are covered through social dialogue and collective bargaining. Then, what's the content of social dialogue and collective bargaining? Well, namely, working time. This is a key element, as it has been said. Where did this bring us to? Well, many workers have under 40 hours a week. An average is below 38.5. I'm not talking about real working time, because in Spain we have a major issue on this matter for several reasons. And the real working time is around 34 hours. But the average is at 38.5, as I have said. This means that collective bargaining allowed to get results, and this is efficient to reduce the working time, and what's more, to face the different types of situation we have in Spain. When we talk about companies, about society, or about industries. And here I want to say that workers always aspire more to work-life balance and co-responsibility. But this doesn't mean that everything relies on the shoulders of the companies. When we try to make progress and to reach a new model, well, we need to share the responsibilities. And therefore, we also need to think about public policies, about care, about senior centers, about public funding, and so on and so forth. And so we need a dialogue. We need to share the burden and responsibilities with the social partners and with the states. So it's putting things too simply to try to tackle everything through a law imposed by the state. This doesn't take into account the economic and financial circumstances. You have many unemployed as well, and productivity is below European standards. Therefore, I think that the impact of a legal reduction should be analyzed thoroughly. We should first think about the productivity level of Spain, and then we should truly see if this will allow to answer all the needs of all the workers and then all the industries. Honestly, we do think that collective bargaining allows to cover all the diversity much better than a law that would be imposed by the state to face a problem that actually already doesn't exist anymore in many industries. You know, if the reduction of working time is combined to collective bargaining, we will crash into the wall in Spain because we already have many instruments and we have a variety of tools. 80% of the adaptations are demanded by women. So what does it mean? We bring women back at home. What does this mean? Well, that we need flexible frameworks that allow to improve the situation of women. And this works better through collective bargaining than through a law. Because when we talk about a collective bargaining, well, we talk about social dialogue between employers and workers. Thank you very much. We've already tackled several questions I wanted to mention, so I think that the second question can be tackled quite directly, and we shouldn't beat around the bush, because the second question was related to the public intervention in the state. How much is it recommended or necessary to have maybe at the EU level or at the national level, or to have an intervention, or is it better to have collective bargaining in your countries? In Spain, collective bargaining is extremely strong, and it covers quite a lot. So could you please tackle this question, but be quite brief? Maybe, I don't know, 1 minute per speaker. I'll try to stick to 60 seconds. First, collective bargaining has played and needs to continue playing a very important role when it comes to working time. But is it enough? According to us today, no. For over 40 years' time, Spain has reduced the working time. And in 40 years' time, there has been an increase of productivity, of technology in work, and so on and so forth. And this doesn't justify to have those 40 hours nowadays. What's more, I am very happy, and I do hope that this agreement for collective bargaining will continue, and we know that the employees will come with a huge proposal. I am delighted by the fact that today the employees want to work on this. They did not want in 2012. They wanted to make 10% of the working time more flexible. They demanded this. But here it looks like that something might shift. One more detail I would like to add. In Spain, collective bargaining is at the level of industries, and this has an impact on SMEs and multinationals. So, talking about collective bargaining for SMEs while we've mainly focused on big companies doesn't make sense, and this is a shock. I think the debate is about the limits in the end. When we need to set limits, well, the limits everywhere in Europe and in Spain should stem from the law. One cannot work if they are at least 16 years old or if they have certain capacities and as of 18 this or that. All of this comes from a legal framework. And should we adapt, well, the maximum working time through collective bargaining? Well, then we would weaken the law. So beware. We need to think about our working relationships and how we see the companies. If we see companies that are exclude and that we have exclusive working relationships, well, then we need to be careful. If we have more integration, well, then we can imagine that €1 can be a certain way or another to compensate for working time. If we have proper integration, then spending can be very useful. You know, in Spain, when we talk about working time, well, in 40 years' time, in some industries, in some companies, in some provinces, huge progresses have been achieved, and in some none at all. And this has nothing to do nor with the industries, nor with the size of the company, nor, well, with the provinces. When we talk about hostelry, well, there is a collective bargain in Navarra from 1973 for many. Then trade. In the vast country, there is also a collective bargaining on 37.5 hours. And when we talk about the steel industry, there are over 1,800 collective bargainings. For offices, 1,700 collective bargainings in Navarre. In 1824 in Madrid. For steel, 1,700 in Ibusqua. For small and multinational. Then, farming, agriculture, whenever ever you can have 37.5 hours, well, 1,715 collective bargaining in Guadalajara. Cleaning, 1,704. And Zamora, Valencia, and elsewhere, many as well. Meaning that it's not about having agreements with SMEs or big companies or with industries. It's all about listening or not listening to the court when they talk about reducing working time in 1803, and then the decision of 1991 when they said, well, beware, if we don't have a law, a threshold, well, then these inequalities will be marked by huge question marks. And so we need thresholds, and thresholds are only possible through law. We cannot just set limits through collective bargaining. They should set limits, yes, but the thresholds should come by law. We can say, well, it's maybe not the moment to change the limits, the thresholds, fair enough, but the limits should stem from the law. This should not be debated on. Then there are many problems. And the only data I could get depending on the size of the companies, comes from the Bank of Spain. We have observatories on the companies, and it's very interesting, but it's not split the same way. The split per size only comes from the Bank of Spain, and it says that the margins on sales have increased by 11% for SMEs, 20% for big companies, average 24%. So then I also analyzed the distribution of workers. Under 50 person, 6.7 million workers. In companies over 50 person, over 10 million workers. Then there is another issue. How do we want to protect? Obviously, we want to protect the freelance workers. It looks like there are many, and it looks like it's good, and we say it's bad when craftsmen and freelance are disappearing. Well, anything can reach saturation, but having so many, and the country where you have the most freelancers is India with 55.8%. There are many, and they represent a huge share. And the US has only 6% freelancers amongst the most advanced country. And what's the country we want to look like the most? The US or India?
Yes, also from the ETUC side, we very much agree that those things have to go hand in hand. So of course we need clear legal limits on maximum working hours. And with the legislation that can be provided at the national level, with the support through the collective bargaining, we should encourage exactly the trade unions and employers to negotiate and to reach the agreements that are going to correspond to the needs of the workers. Because yes, of course, we still believe that collective bargaining is the best mechanism for improving working conditions. That's for sure. But let's be also very honest. Indeed, collective bargaining in Spain is very high. But unfortunately, this is not the reality for the majority of the European countries. 19 countries in EU have collective bargaining below 80%. Why am I referring to 80%? Because this is the objective of the minimum wage directive, which basically says that all of the countries that have collective bargaining below 80% needs to develop action plans to encourage this collective bargaining and to increase the coverage. And what we're seeing now is that, yeah, many of the countries are struggling with this. Many of the trade unions are struggling because the employers do not even want to negotiate. So we need to change the culture where exactly through the social dialogue, through collective agreements, we're going to recognize the needs of the workers as well, take this into the account, and with this make also the job ads and the placements more attractive. Because especially nowadays when many of the companies are facing labor market shortages, providing better working conditions, which includes also working time reduction, could be a solution as well. But then let's start talking about this. And I think that, yeah, exactly how it's happening in Spain, it's a very good example because the government is providing the framework and is trying to lower the ceiling, going down, 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 but at the same time, it's providing the enabling framework for the collective bargaining to happen. So the countries have to play a role in this as well. And yes, we do see a lot of examples. We see the examples from France and from Italy and Germany and UK and Austria and Belgium and Netherlands and Spain, of course, and Portugal. Those are all the examples where we already see that this is happening through the collective agreements. And why at the same time, yes, collective agreements are very important because they can adjust the reduction of working time according to their needs. So sometimes this will be just reduction of the working hours. Sometimes it's going to be a shift to 4-day work week. Sometimes it's reducing the working time throughout the expenditure of a working life. Or sometimes it's the benefits for the elderly people or giving more time to the elderly people. So there can indeed be different models, but as I said, it has to be a combination of both. Of course, the national legislation and of course, collective bargaining. And I think that considering that the last big fight for working time was more than 100 years ago, when workers have to actually pay with their lives to ensure the 40 hours work week or 5 days work week. And as a society, we need to progress as well. It's not so revolutionary that 100 years after, and even more, we are asking to reduce the working time a little bit, because everything is changing in the society. Technology has improved, automatization, robots. This should all serve us to improve our working conditions, to work less, and to benefit from this productivity. Because when talking about productivity, workers and wages are lacking behind the productivity. So even when the productivity is increasing, workers are not getting a fair share. Their wages are not increasing along with productivity. Their working times, it's not being reduced when the productivity is growing. So yeah, let's find the balance, but it really means that, yeah, trade unions, social partners need to work together.
Bueno, pues yo creo que nuestra respuesta es muy clara.
Right. I think our reply is crystal clear. You asked us to be synthetic, and this is what we are going to do. I think that, as Tia said, collective bargaining is the key. We are about 92% coverage of collective bargaining for most of the Spanish territory. We mentioned most conventions in the richest region where it is possible we do it, but it is not the case everywhere. In all territories or in all sectors, there is no homogeneity. So that means that there are discrepancies. We need to take into account the requests of the workers. And as Tia said, very well so, we have a problem. There is a lack of professionals. That means that you need to keep on negotiating with workers and taking into account their needs. We believe that collective bargaining is of the essence, and it is promoted by the EU as well as the ILO. When we are talking about illegal standards, that is reducing the coverage of collective bargaining, you can call that whatever you like, but that is not good. Collective bargaining may lose its meaning. So why should we sit down and negotiate when the government made its decision? When we have a good model, it's very risky to stop with a system that is working well, because if we want to regulate relationship between workers and corporations, it's very complicated and might be a problem, because collective bargaining. So we are asking the speaker to speak a bit slower for the interpreters. Thank you very much. Well, the question was a very concrete one. If we can use a general law, general framework, or anything else, indeed, it is the country's own sovereignty. And the EU can do nothing about it. The reform is in the workers' statutes and in the constitutions as well. It is very clear that this is something that is mentioned in collective negotiations. I think, and that was very clear. We are not against reducing the working day or the working time, but we are challenging, we are questioning how you can do so, because there are discrepancies. It does not meet the needs for flexibility for workers, neither to the heterogeneity of sectors when there is a lot of changes, transition, digital transition, ecological transition, and so on and so forth. Or in a complex geopolitical background, all companies since the pandemic have gone through a lot of changes and modifications of all kinds. So we believe that you always need to take into account collective negotiation. Otherwise, you take a risk that is not good for our country. Something was said earlier, which I believe is very important. If you reduce the working day while there are collective negotiations, or when the union signs a minimum wage in 2025 that allows to increase the average net salary, and also with compensation and absorption concepts. These are two initiatives that jeopardize the collective bargaining. Because we know that it is key for collective bargaining, and it represents a 6% increase of wage. If you add up to that the automatization of the increase of minimum wage, we are touching upon issues that are dealt with through collective bargaining. So we believe it's not the right way to go. The right way is collective bargaining. We should not touch this collective bargaining, and we are insisting on the fact that we need a longer deadline so that collective bargaining can lead to the working time reduction. But we don't think we should go through a legal way. Raúl is always insisting, I'm sure he's teasing us. The reform in 2012, it was not agreed by the Employers Association, while in 2020 it was the case. We had a more stable, more inclusive labor market henceforth, and we are very satisfied, I must say, with the macroeconomic data, and with this reduction of working day is a problem. One of you said that the difference was not so high. It was not a question of small, medium, or large companies. But yes, it is, in fact, a question of the size of corporations, of enterprises, because it affects everybody, but it all depends on the hours included in the collective bargaining. It depends whether you are at 1,800 or 1,700. 37.5 hours a week is 1,700. So if you are a micro enterprise, you have less flexibility too. And that's obvious. You are a small company. You don't have so many finances. So this reduction of working time is more complicated. On the other hand, if you are a company working for the public sector in Spain, you cannot cascade down the increase of wages and cotization to the state. So that becomes very complicated as well. Many companies are taking this increase of minimum wage plus the reduction of working time and be in a very difficult situation. Now, if you work in shifts, it's even more complicated. Can we have a contract for 6.5 hours, for example? It will depend on the number of part-time workers that you have in your enterprise. I'm thinking of McDonald's or that kind of chains. I mean, you have SMEs, but you also have large companies, and they have a lot of part-time workers. They have a lot of students, for example. So what shall we do with these? They will have no additional time. All that must be added up. So there is a huge heterogeneity And working time reduction, if it is generalized, will have a very different impact. It depends on the size of the company, but also on other criteria. Moreover, we have a shortage of some talents in some sectors, like in transport sectors, transport of goods or transport of passengers. We have a shortage of workers. Where can we find them? Or can we find them overnight? Another sector is sector of care. There is a lack of 400,000 workers. What shall we do? The objective is to professionalize cares in order to avoid an effect that could be described as having an impact on women. So working time reduction has economic and social items in it, also productivity and profitability items that must be taken into account during the debate. And you need, of course, to make a good impact assessment of that frame. Thank you very much. We had two other issues to talk about, but yes, these topics are very important indeed. And we are many around the table to have something to say. I would like to ask another question. You can choose one or two topics. You don't need to talk about all these topics at the same time. Indeed, working time reduction has an economic impact. It also has an organizational impact, that's for sure. So you can talk about that if you like. And labor shortage. We have touched upon that, and that is very visible in different sectors. So how can we address this working time reduction issue in the light of this labor shortage? So these are topics I might put on the table. Well, let's go on the same order. Very, very briefly on these topics. There is something Fernando said earlier in the union project and agreement. You need to take into account the registry. 2 million extra hours per week are not paid or compensated. Plus digital disconnection. That is a right, as much as working time reduction. We may agree on one part, maybe not on the other. Second point, the economic impact. When we talked about the minimum wage increase, there were talks of disasters, catastrophes, and in some speeches you could even hear people say that these are theories. Then these theories are proven wrong and you need to find a new theory. We think that in some collective bargaining, we maintain a maximum time, which means that there are investments in other factors. We're talking about productivity issue in Spain, but you don't take into account real factors impacting this productivity deficit. The deficit is not the work factor. It depends on the way of different sectors. The productivity deficit is the use of capital. It's mostly on that issue in Spain. Therefore, we must be consistent there. Jesus Mercadet talked earlier about part-time. Most part-time work is done by women in an involuntary way. And part-time in Spain I do not have to justify as a company why I hire part-time, because I can use extra time paid the same way. That is the reality today in Spain, without transposing directive of previsible conditions that would give way to other possibilities. Now, when it comes to part-time, I think it should be maybe the pillar for the next reform in Spain. There is another point when it comes to workers' shortage, labor shortage. The major issue with this shortage that we are talking about in Spain is not based on statistics. There are sectors, and Rosa said that there are still some demand for work in good transportation sector. In Soria, there is a lack of drivers because they have a cheap collective bargaining. When you apply the Barcelona collective bargaining, there's no problem. And Spain will be faced with a lack of workers also if it doesn't solve the access to housing issue, especially for seasonal workers. Indeed, if you get a wage but you don't earn enough to pay for a room when you have to work in Mallorca or any other place, it's completely pointless. You need to take into account all aspects, all costs, and all benefits. Let me try to fill to complete rather what Raoul said, in order to quiet down a little bit. We are talking about a modification that happened 40 years ago, and indeed we did improve things. But then we need to insist on collective bargaining, and if we do that with law, no problem. The Constitutional Court worked on this issue and accepted it. There are some topics on which I agree. We could see that we can be entitled to 7.5 hours, whatever the sector, whatever the size of the company. There is no problem. Now, what is true is that in Guadalajara, the collective bargaining is at 1,715, while in Cuenca it's 1,824, diminishing for over 100 hours. It means a lot. So probably the landing must be some kind of flexible. We need to review some things. We need to adjust. Going from Cuenca to Guadalajara, it's not very complicated, but from 1,824 hours to 1,715 hours, it is complicated, and I agree with that. I also agree on the fact that administration should set the example. If we are talking about an integration concept of companies where we are all the same, and this can be dedicated to the capital or to the wages, where the administration, if it has to reduce the working time of the public sector, they have to contribute. I agree with that. Completely agree with that, I should say. Now, it means that it is a question of willingness. I think the limits set by the law, and we're talking here about legal aspect, logically it must be fixed by the law. And we need to enforce the law afterwards. Let me conclude. we need to take into account other type of very important items in working relationships, but they have nothing to do with working time reduction. Raoul talked about the workers' shortage. In some area, this has nothing to do with working time reduction. One of the issue is access to housing. 2.5 million unemployed people. With this lack of shortage in Europe, to me it is not compatible. 2.5 million unemployed people looking for work and a lack of a shortage, a workers' shortage. There's something that doesn't click here. How can we organize working relations in Spain? Because it looks like a failure, and that's incredible. We have a very high unemployment rate in Spain, and at the same time, we have a working shortage, a labor shortage. Around this table, we are trying to see how we can act and what we can do. If we want to have equal sectors, workers, companies, there are some hurdles along the way, and we need to discuss this all together.
The myths and from the macroeconomic point of view, working time reduction does not necessarily lead to lower productivity, to lower production. It does not, because there has been many studies and real life examples where it has been proven that when workers are less exhausted, when they are more motivated, they have better ability to concentrate. So in less hours, they can produce the same or even better. Because overworked or burnout, it's basically the hidden cost of the current system. So I think that, if we even look at the countries such as Germany or Netherlands or Denmark, they are the countries that have some of the shortest average working hour, but they are constantly among the ones that are the most productive ones. So it's really not about working more, but it's about working better. And it's about having a smarter organization of time and of tasks. And as I said before, the technology, the AI, automatization, digitalization should really help us in that. So it is about investing in this as well. It is about investing in training and upskilling so that workers have the necessary skills. And it is, of course, about also making jobs more attractive by improving working conditions. Yes, indeed, there is this paradox that we're talking about labor market shortages, and at the European level, there are 13 million unemployed people. So maybe we just need to do a little bit of better matchmaking or like really see where are the needs and then provide the pathway for those unemployed people so they can get reintegrated to the labor market. And at the same time, one of the main drivers of labor market shortages in some of the sector, it's exactly poor working conditions. So it's not other aspects, but like, why is it so hard to get a truck driver? Well, because they need to work long hours, they need to work during the weekends in a very difficult working conditions. It's the same if we look at the care sectors. If we look at the nurses who are, again, working long hours and are exhausted physically and emotionally. The other part of the care sector, it's being more and more basically platformized. So it's on demand. So it's non-standard forms of employment. Through app, you need to visit different homes, again, in a very demanding and very hostile, many times, working environment. And it's the same with the teachers and the hospitalization sector and so on and so forward. So I think that, if we improve those working conditions, potentially also by reducing working time, we could get more workers who would be interested in working in those sectors as well. So I think that, from the employer's point of view as well, as soon as they understand that indeed happy, satisfied and healthy worker, it's going to contribute to the productivity, then we can have the entry point for the dialogue as well. And still looking from the macroeconomic point of view, reduction of working time with no loss in pay also leads to better health. It leads to more gender equality. It leads to more job creations. It can lead to work-life balance. And this is beneficial for the society at large. If we have loss costs in health sector, then as a society we're benefiting. The public funding is benefiting. We can invest more exactly in care, childcare, for example, so that more women can participate in the labor market. We can invest more in housing so that workers will actually have access to the jobs. We can invest more in public transport so they can travel to the job. So it can all come together, but we really need to look at it from the macro level as well.
Bueno, yo voy a ser muy breve porque además me tengo que marchar, o sea que ya pido disculpas porque voy a salir rápido, que tengo que coger un vuelo de vuelta. Varias cosas.
Well, I will be brief because I have to leave. I have a flight to catch. When it comes to labor, 44.8% of companies in Spain have a labor shortage. That means that Spanish companies cannot find workers, whatever the territories, whatever the sector. And there are many areas in Spain where you have no housing issues. We are talking about reducing working time with high wages, but you cannot find any workers, whatever the sector is. There is and it's impossible to be able to adapt to this new law. And that's something that will affect the citizens. It's something that I could see with my own eyes for the public sector. Road transport. And you go and hire workers in other countries. If this law is adopted, it will be impossible to maintain the contracts for goods transport on road. This 10% cost increase will affect all workers, whatever the sector. And in Spain, 37% of Spanish companies are exporters. So that means that exportations will be also impacted because they will be less competitive than smaller companies, those counting only 1 or 2 workers, will open for a lesser time. They will have less advice, less anything. What happens? What will happen? What will happen is that these hours are done by self-employed people. Maybe you don't want self-employed people or micro companies because that will be the case with that reform. We're talking about over 48 hours a week. In France, it's 55% of self-workers are working a lot. So we all deserve the balanced development because you cannot have first-tier and second-tier citizens in Spain, self-employed workers work more than 48 hours a week for 38% of the cases. And those companies with 1 or 2 workers with a little shop, for example, they will keep the same thing. They will not find anybody for working half an hour a day. They will have to work this extra half hour a day. So I believe it is very important to go through collective bargaining because we have very low productivity in Spain, below the European average. Our companies are very small. we have on average a company with 4 workers. And you have to think about this type of companies when you take that type of measures, because it's the very high majority of companies in Spain. And you have 10 companies appearing every day. Maybe you do not want small companies, but many companies start small, then they grow. If you have no small companies, you will never have a large one. And this policy will suppress that kind of thing, because if you work 50 and 60 hours a week just to get your wage, nobody will want to create their company. I think it's a major risk. Organization-wise, it's impossible to find somebody for working half an hour a day. So that means that those small companies that have 2 or 3 workers cannot take these changes, except if it is part of a collective bargaining with some criteria. The examples that were given for Guadalajara and Cuenca are very different from what was said, but whatever happened, it should be done within collective bargaining. If it is possible in Guadalajara, it will be possible in Cuenca as well, but you cannot do that without transition, without the possibility to reach an agreement. This is what I want to say for small companies, and now I need to fly away.
Bueno, pues como queríamos dejar un ratito de debate con el público.
Since we wanted to have a tiny debate with the public, I just want to say a few things as a conclusion. A conclusion not of the roundtable, but a conclusion for me. Because, well, what has been said here, according to Fernando, is that we need a legal framework to set thresholds, but no. So anyhow, what do I see first? We shouldn't compare the current situation with the situation of the 1980s, when we had this revolution of the 40 hours working week. I want to say that this stems for an interprofessional agreement that the 4 parties we represent here did sign, the 2 trade unions and us. And we aimed at pushing forward this transition from different rules that were a majority to collective bargaining rules that stemmed from the dictatorship, actually. And that's how everything is based on collective bargaining. And I thought that what we did here, was aligned with that. And our model is auto-governance, and therefore, in this agreement and in another agreement, we have for the resolution of conflict, but this one says that to govern ourselves independently through the negotiations, well, we need another exit door. And what did I see? Well, that today, and we've been debating this for a very long time now, I think, and I want to say to Fernando with a lot of respect, because I love them, you want the government to do your job legally, because huge agreements are signed, namely in the chemical industry, and they say, well, that it is far above 1,712 hours a year. And here we talked. You said, rather, Raúl, you said that working time went against innovation. That's what you said, more or less. But I think that innovation is a duty for companies and for workers. In the context we are in, taking into account all the transitions that are extremely important and that need to be tackled. And the same way innovations are necessary, we need to put forward nowadays lifelong learning and continuous training. and reducing working time is amazing as a tool, as an electoral tool, but we forget about sustainability for workers when we talk about ecology, digitalization, becoming older and facing many other challenges. We need to work with the ministry through the social dialogue, namely on the law on lifelong learning. Thanks to this, the training has been improved, but we forget about lifelong learning, I insist. And this is a pending point that needs to be tackled. These 40 hours were total chaos. We, with the interprofessional agreement, we did what we had, and the MPs then said, no, it's not okay. And then total chaos, a total chaos, really. And we solved the chaos through collective bargaining, and we should learn from our mistakes. And as a conclusion, I will say that beyond the 20 agreements we have reached on many different matters, key matters I say, I want to say that we have over 23 tripartite agreements, and here I want to mention the one for collective bargaining that is finalizing this year, because it allowed us to guide the efforts of these last years. It allowed us to avoid inflation, a second inflation. It allowed us to improve the capacities of workers. This is a very good agreement that also tackles many different elements. So taking all of this into account, I would say that we should see the forest behind the trees, behind the working time. We need to take into account the SMEs and everything. And we can see it in the law books. Well, even experts don't know how to manage the law, what the rules are. And I have true data here. This paralyzes investments. Investments are plummeting. And why? Well, because there is uncertainty that stems from this blurry legal framework. So this leads to cautiousness, and this is horrendous for SMEs. I think that what we do it good. But as a consequence, well, we should take action and not leave everything to the government.
For being short and brief in your answers. We don't have much time. Maybe, no, we don't have much time. Maybe one question, no? No? Okay, so no. We don't have, maybe just one question. Thank you.
It will be quick. It will not be a question, but just a complimentary comment. Anna Kwiatkowicz, Business Europe, so a counterpart of ETUC at the EU level, cross-industry employers organizations, big businesses, small businesses as well. A few points. We have been working extensively on working time. Flexibility and working time reduction is one of the ways to address it. And we also agree that we need to see a bigger picture. Bigger picture means productivity, European productivity in relation to global competitors. We are lagging behind. We have been lagging behind for 30 years. Whenever we manage to increase productivity, employment is going down. If we increase employment, productivity is going down. In Europe, we need to increase both at the same time. And this is crucial, and it has to be done now. From the employer's perspective, reducing working time with the same money, paying the same salaries, is complicated. That means increasing labor cost. That means increase of salaries. That has to be linked to productivity. It can be done just like this because people will be happier. Of course, everybody will be happier to earn the same money and work less, but it's not that's not the sustainable approach to economy. Shortages of labor, skills and quantitative and qualitative. There's an issue of skills, the mismatch, but also I would like to bring to your attention the question of many people that are inactive in Europe. We have a huge problem with the inactive people. Why they are not wanting to work? That's the question mark that I leave you with. But also we have, and we shouldn't shy away of that, a huge demographic changes, meaning decreasing number of people working age and increasing aging population. This is also something very, very important. Working time regulation is in place in many member states. If there is not in the national system, there are collective agreements. And I will still call for leaving the right space for national social partners at the appropriate level, be it sectoral, be it company level, to negotiate nuanced solutions. Because again, flexibility of working time will mean something else for someone starting off the career and something else for people who are starting families and something else for people who are mature and out of their family responsibilities, if they did have a family. And the last point to the professor, I absolutely agree with your idea of people trying to use less or controlling addiction, but again, there are limits to employers' responsibility. In a sense, what we can show to employers and what we can expect, and also what we can be held accountable for. So we do agree that there are new challenges related to telework, right to disconnect, but at the same time, we can't do everything. We can't control employers. They are adults. They also have to take control over things. For example, right to disconnect. Nobody's expecting people to check emails at night. If there's clearly defined working time and after work rest period. Yes, I will stop here. Thank you very much for giving the time despite the limit. Thank you.
Thank you.
So now some housekeeping. We are having the lunch in a room that we need to walk a little bit and going down to the 3rd floor. So we need to keep the group all together. Zoe there will be the leader. We'll have Victor and Lourdes in the middle, and I'll be behind you. So no, we don't lose anyone. But it's important that we keep the group together, okay? El ordenador no. So then I'll translate to Spanish if you don't. Keep your laptops and mobiles with you, okay? You can leave the luggage here, but please keep the valuable with you, please, okay? ¿Necesito traducir al inglés, al español o ya me habéis entendido? Gracias.
One thing before starting the table, if someone just remember to sign the list, which is there, so everyone is as attendee, considered attendee. En castellano, que si no habéis firmado, acordaros de afirmar la lista. Okay, so let's carry on. Let's continue with this seminar. Actually, now we are talking about the main results of the project. So we are now talking about the innovative case studies in France, Finland, the Netherlands, Ireland, Hungary, and Spain. For that, we have this table full of professor doctors, as you can see in the program. And as they are the main protagonists, because they are the ones who did the research, I'm going just to give them the floor. And this table is going to be with 2 rounds for each. The first round, we are going to talk about what they found in their investigation about the innovative management times. And in the second round, we will just have some concluding remarks for this project. So now I'm going to give the floor to the first speaker today, which is Professor Dr. Dragman Sheik from University of College Dublin. The floor is yours.
Okay, so Adrian told us that we should first talk about what time of working time of flexible innovative management, what is the framework, yeah? So, and in Ireland, I must say that debates on innovative working organization are more focusing on remote working and hybrid working than on working time. That's due to the massive commuting times resulting from the dysfunctional housing market and also dysfunctional public sector transport. I think there's also a relation to the legal framework because it maximizes the flexibility of the EU working time directives. So our average 48 hours a week only has to be achieved in 4 months, and there is more flexibility for the sectors where the working time directive allows it. So there's no creative incentive to shortening the working week. In spite of that, the 4-day week has been a demand of trade unions in public and private sectors, but there has been no progress. Only the pandemic led to some progress, because now suddenly many employees didn't know we can do work remotely, and they wanted to continue this. And this also led to reflections in the regulatory framework. The implementation of the Work-Life Balance Directive in December 2023 was used to introduce a general right of workers to individually demand remote working. However, there's no collective underpinning. And that's the next stop I'm taking. Our collective bargaining framework is based on voluntarism. Basically, that means that the extent to which workers are represented and collective bargaining prevails depends on the ability of trade unions to force employers to recognize them as bargaining partners. On the other hand, this is said to be the reason why so many US-American companies are in Ireland, because they don't like trade unions and they don't have to recognize them. Now, in workplaces where trade unions are strong, there is a semblance of works councils, although there's no legislative obligation to have any works councils, and much less are there any legal obligations to negotiate on working time in the workplace of work. So that's why we actually expected there won't be anything. And we were proven wrong. We looked into highly unionized sectors, into banking and higher education, and we found special circumstances. First of all, in banking, there's a problem of recruiting, as we've heard earlier, and so the employers were keen of being seen as being family-friendly and friendly for mental health. And that was a background on which our trade unions in the banking sector could achieve a collective agreement guaranteeing paid parental leave, where the legislation only guarantees unpaid, and also in the other bank, a collective agreement giving 10 days of care leave, 10 days a year, and that care leave is not just for family members, but also for neighbors and friends, and that's also paid. In the higher education sector, there was a consideration that academics always work flexible, and the professional staff had never been allowed to work flexible. In Ireland, there's a tradition of presentism. And nevertheless, after the pandemic, professional staff saw, well, we can work remotely. It is proven. We want to continue. And here we can see, and I'm coming to the, that our voluntarist industrial relations system has loops. So, for example, and I go to more of the system in the second round. For example, there's a Workplace Relations Commission, which from 2015 has been a forum to force employers who don't want to negotiate to take on negotiations. And one of the unions, our University 1, University A, the SIP2 trade union, used that Workplace Relations Commission's routes after negotiation failed. The employer only wanted to give professional staff 1 day a week for remote working, and they achieved 1 day a week all the year and 21 weeks in the year when there's no teaching, 2 days a week. That's quite a feat. Whereas in the University B, success is very limited. the trade unions negotiated and negotiated and negotiated. What they got is the employer had offered management can allow you to work remotely, and the trade unions achieved that if management doesn't allow you to work remotely, there's a grievance procedure where employees can be represented by employers. Now, I've given the case study first, and I go back to the industrial relations context later.
Thank you very much. And now,
Hello. I'm going to start with the situation in France. As you know, France is the country that can be called the pioneers on regulating reduction of working time. That was done in France through two main laws, the so-called Aubry laws from 1998 and 2000. With this legislation, what the French aimed was to promote a standard working week of a maximum 35 hours per week. This legislation, when the implementation, the idea was to try to promote a better work-life balance of workers, but it was also meant to lower unemployment, that there will be more job creations because with the reduction of working time, there will be more positions available. This legislation gave a lot of room for the collective bargaining to negotiate on how to implement this policy of 35-hour weekly working time. A lot of negotiating freedom. This could be done through company agreements, and it could be done also through a collective agreement at a higher level. So there was a lot of flexibility also on calculating working time annually that was left to the collective bargaining to be arranged, and also important that there were some exceptions. It was not that all companies needed to provide this maximum working week of 35 hours. There were some sectors that there could be some exceptions there, and also there was an exception for a separate arrangement that could be done for the managerial staff, the so-called cadre, and there are several categories included in this managerial staff. This was accompanied by another package of legislation that was trying to promote actually that companies were going on that direction of maximum 35 hours a week, working week. And that was a package dealing with reduction of social security contribution for those companies decreasing working time to that maximum, and also with taxation, reduced taxation contributions. There were some tax incentives for companies to follow that path. But as I said, there was enhanced flexibility for the company in arranging the working hours. This has had varying effects because according to Eurostat, what we can conclude is that not all companies in France are working this maximum 35 hours work week. The statistics from Eurostat from 2022 show that the average working hours in France oscillated between 36 and 39 hours. So we know that that is the aim, but there are many exceptions and many flexibility that can be arranged through collective bargaining. Important also in France, I think France has also been pioneer in recognizing the right to disconnect. That was done through legislation that was approved in 2016, the Loi El Khomri, and then it was amended and included in the Labour Code. So it is in the Code du Travail in France since 2017, January 2017. All employees have a right to disconnect. The idea is try to promote that the well-being of and the health, promote the health of the employees by forbidding to managers and employees for sending or replying any emails after working hours, and it's quite strictly applied in France. As we know, there is a proposal for regulating this at the European level, but we will see what happens with that, but France has this right recognized. Interesting is that we know in France this legislation, other legislation, several rounds, especially the last reform in 2017, that are trying to promote decentralization of collective bargaining in France, and that is applicable also to this area of working time. There is a sort of preference for company agreements to regulate several working conditions and also working time in France. So there is a clear intervention from the state, but there is a lot of flexibility that can be arranged through collective bargaining in France. So there's a state that is traditionally intervening in regulating industrial relations, but that is combined with promoting collective bargaining, in particular for this area. About the Netherlands is a completely different story. They are also the champions in part-time work and in flexible working arrangements in Europe, but that is done in a different way. In the Netherlands, they were one of the first countries in Europe, together with Germany, to pass legislation granting employees the right to request a reduction of working time. That was in 2000, the Wet aanpassing arbeidsduur. And that legislation has been amended in 2016 and is called now the Law on Flexible Working, Wet Flexibel Werk, that empowers employees not only to request a reduction or later on, it's also possible, an increasement of your working hours, so it's sort of reverse, because you can ask for a reduction for a period, and after 1 year you can ask for an increasement, so it's sort of reverse this request. And also is giving more flexibility also on the location of the employment and also on the distribution of the working hours. That is the main change with the legislation from 2016. In 2021, there was also an attempt from some political parties. They registered a proposal called Working Where You Want, Werken waar je wilt, so that you could choose to telework and then you will have a preference, and that has to be taken into account by your employer unless there was business reason to deny it. But this legislation was not passed was rejected by the majority of the parliament in the Netherlands. The legislation on flexible working, it provides a very strong right to the employee to request this reduction or this increasement of working time. The employer has to consider it in good faith, and in principle, he must grant that possibility unless there are significant business or service-related valid reasons for rejecting it. And the case law, most of it has always gone on the direction that they really need to prove there are a strong business reason to reject that request from the employee. Is this the reason why it's so easy in the Netherlands to request flexible working arrangement? My answer is no. It's good that there is this legislation in the background, but there is a culture of promoting conciliation of working and family life, facilitating access to part-time work, and that is proof also by some of the reports that they write on the implementation of this law. Every 5 years, there is a commission that look at the implementation, and they know that in the Human Resources Department, they are not even aware of this law, but it's so embedded in the culture to grant this kind of request that there is no problematic for employees to request it and to get it. Interesting also, in the Netherlands, apart from this, there are several other arrangements, flexible working arrangements, that are not included in the legislation, but are negotiated quite often in the collective agreements. For example, what they call the ATFs, Arbeidstijdverkorting. That is a system also that's similar to what they have in France also, that if you do some overtime over certain periods, you are sort of accumulating some of these days per year. Or in some collective agreements, now you know that you have an amount of these days per year, and you can request it whenever you want. So I think in the Netherlands, in general, this coupled with the fact that part-time work is also part of the culture. There are nearly 5 million people working part-time in the Netherlands. There is a very good system for flexibility on working time available for the employees. one thing that I would like to say, once that being said, is perfect the system in the Netherlands? No, this system has also some drawbacks. The main drawbacks that I see is that is the gender impact that it has. Because of these 4.5 million, nearly 5 million people working part-time, most of them are women. And this helps for conciliation of working and family life, but this means that women are working part-time, most of them small part-time jobs, around 20 hours per week. They are earning less and they are building less pension. So in the long term, that creates also problems of economic dependence of the husbands or the partners, and also poverty in the old age to a certain extent. So it's perfect? No, it's not perfect. But from the point of view of available flexibility on working time and possibility of conciliating working and family life, it's obviously a good system. Is it exportable? No. It's working in the context that is working. In the Netherlands, they have very low unemployment rates. They have high productivity rates, one of the highest in Europe, and they also have a coverage, old age pension, that is a universal system, and everybody's getting the retirement pension when they non-contributive. So yeah, it's a good system, but with some drawbacks, of course.
No, it's quite interesting, your conclusion and the cultural background, and also I think it's for lawyers a very bad news that the law cannot do everything. So now we go to Professor Dr. Mina van Gerven from the University of Helsinki. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. So I'm going to talk about Finland. Finland is generally known as the good student in the class. Currently, of course, we have a bit difficult headmaster in our country, so the government has maybe a little bit difficulties of finding these agreements today with the social partners, especially on the side of the trade unions. So we are living turbulent times. But relating to the case studies that we have done, we wanted to understand a bit more of what is flexibility in those sectors that are, by definition, very unflexible. So also it maybe shines through that we are not lawyers in my team. We are sociologists and social policy scholars. So we have slightly different kind of lenses, and we definitely don't think that law solves everything. Quite the opposite sometimes. But going back to Finland, I would like to say that Finland has quite a flexible law in itself, that the Working Time Act that we have puts a basis where we can already have flexibility. So it's general up to maximum of 8 hours a day or 40 hours per week, but there's already flexibility within the law that they can vary, for example, with respect to 4 hours in order to make work more flexible in itself. But of course, in addition to law, we have also a system that relies quite heavily on collective bargaining. And flexibility is therefore not only kind of legalized, but it's also, of course, very highly institutionalized in Finland. And the collective agreements are really part and parcel of the main instruments of how we are trying to manage the working time. And they can be then expanded, or they can deviate from the statutory norms. And for example, they allow companies and sectors to do different kind of innovations, like in the project, the e-book that we delivered, the Finnish case, you can read more about the flexible full-time job models or work time banks and so on and so forth. So they can do quite a lot. So in that sense, it allows to do quite flexible things, but of course flexibility is not a nature in all parts of the labor market. We basically studied the unflexible part of the labor market, looking at what happens in the HoReCa, so hotel, restaurant, and retail sectors, and health and social service sector. And these are traditionally quite inflexible. They are low paid, highly feminized, and they are very typically characteristics by irregular hours and high demand volatility. And when we were looking across these different branches, different sectors, we saw that also flexibility looked quite differently in the HoReCa business. It's overwhelmingly employer-driven. Working time arrangements are really designed in order to make sure that the business cycles can be met, seasonal peaks, also these customer flows must be met. So employees, workers in these sectors, they face quite unstable schedules, very short-term changes in the scheduling, and limited influence and autonomy often with their hours. In comparison, the health and social care sector is interesting that you can actually see that there's much more in demand from the workers' side for the flexibility, in the sense that in order to make sure this very intensive work sector where we have high demands for employment, we have high workloads included then with staffing shortages, and also issues of burnout, which are really a problem in the sector. They are trying to find and manage these with finding more worker-friendly flexibility. So in that sense, I think as social scientists, I think we should be very cautious about when we talk about flexibility, because it seems to have many different kind of phases. And it really requires us to look across the different sectors. So I think even though we have the legal tools and we have the bargaining tools, but we still need attention, especially policy attention and regulation standards, so that in these collective agreement can take place within a sectors that there's high demand for inflexibility, but on the other hand, we must make sure that these policies they can overcome some of the legal and structural barriers, but we must make sure that they balance the needs of the employers and the employees.
Thank you very much. And now we go to Professor Dr. Sarah Hungler. She's going to talk about Hungary.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm a lawyer, sorry. Again, I have a different lens. But I can tell you that what we could see in the Hungarian case studies, it actually mirrors everything what we have in Hungary, in both from an economic and a social side as well, and of course legal as well. So first and foremost, I think the case studies clearly showed that Hungary is a dependent market economy, so where we could see innovative or more innovative than other models that also always happened in large multinational companies, which had the resources, both financially and from human resources point of view, which gave them power to make those ideas happen. And actually, sometimes they had to be very creative. I mean, some companies hired a huge team of tax advisors and lawyers to find solutions how to stretch the interpretation, sometimes balancing in between the gray and the white zone of legality, in order to make these ideas actually pushed through. I mean, pushing through, I mean, in a good sense, by multinational headquarters. And the other thing is that what we could see that the legal framework in Hungary is rather rigid. So it's always the employer who is in charge to allocate the working hours. And that was a sad example of how law could be even more rigid in 2018, when we had the nickname slave law introduced to Hungary, which allows employees to voluntarily pick up extra overtime hours. So by statutory law, the employer can instruct like 250 overtime hours per year. But the voluntary scheme allows workers to take up additional 150, yes, so it's altogether 400 overtime hours. So actually it's just going just against the flow. So instead of like reducing working hours, Hungary is striving towards like increasing working hours. So that is something which is difficult to overcome by policy measures, I think. And last but not least, it also showed that the Hungarian social dialogue is on very weak basis. So collective agreement coverage is less than 20% in Hungary, and definitely not in the sectors which could actually even like consider flexible schemes, because where flexibility happens, like mostly in IT sectors or sectors which could be digitalized, these workers are not usually in the scope or under the scope of any collective agreements. And also we could see that many companies, at least formally, consulted workers' representative bodies, mostly Works Council, but because Works Council have no rights to co-decision or anything stronger than consultation, actually these measures were introduced above they had, but again in a good way. So these companies, I didn't think they meant to overcome the collective labor law structures, but it was just easier for them to not to have another voice which slows down the procedures, because headquarters were kind of demanding on introducing or implementing the globally developed ideas. So I think I will tell more about the specialties when it comes to the second round. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And now on the screen we have Professor Dr. Pablo Jimeno, who is from University of Complutense of Madrid, and he's talking about Spain. Pablo, are you hearing?
Ahora.
Okay, perfect.
Gracias. Gracias, Adrián. Lo primero, mis disculpas por no poder estar presencialmente allí. Me habría gustado.
So, first of all, I would like to apologize not to be with you in person. I would have loved to be here. But you're talking about flexibility in working time. It's also flexibility of space that impeded me from coming here. When it comes to the flexible working time in Spain, we have a system that is looking for some flexibility or rigidity at several levels. The law has a general framework with a number of weekly hours, but then you have a whole yearly calculation, and it gives you the possibility to make flexible the needs when it comes to work and working time. This working time must be coordinated with some resting time. Rest between 2 half days, daily rest, weekly rest, and days off or holidays. We also have an average of weekly days and the hours a day that is provided by law. The several flexibilities, be they negotiated or at workers' level, from the company's perspective, we have a collective bargaining, and we have the possibility to regularly affect day by day or week by week. So these 40 hours a week can be distributed with 10% more or 10% less throughout the year. And this margin could be governed by collective bargaining. We also have the possibility to compensate additional or extra time with new flexibility items. And the regulation when it comes to part-time work provides some flexibility provisions with so-called complementary or supplementary hours that can be negotiated by with a contract, and they are part of collective bargaining. Workers have the possibility to reduce their working time, either be it by conciliation, provisional, personal conciliation, or by some protection measures for women who are victims of domestic abuse. There is a possibility for a flexible time schedule depending on your working agreement, and also when it comes to remote work. This leads us to collective bargaining. I apologize, said the gentleman. Collective bargaining aims at reducing the working day. We have 1,826 hours a year, while collective bargaining established a maximum of 1,700. And then there are different other things that the collective bargainings cover in Spain. It depends on the agreement itself. This collective bargaining can be quite fragmented. For example, 90% is done at provincial level, i.e., most is done through provincial agreements, and the province is the smallest territorial unit in the Spanish classifications of territories. And to make it even more complicated in companies, you can offer additional flexibility measures because within a given company, you can decide to provide other measures like works in shift, extra time, or a flexibility measure, and this will have an impact on the working time arrangement and management. If you want to make things even more complicated, we have discrepancies between the real working day and the effective day. All these hours must be worked, and that means that it does. Well, in Spain we say it doesn't work. Those mechanisms, some mechanisms were introduced to correct those errors. There is now renegotiation from the government, and we are insisting on this day register. In my second intervention, I will talk about other interesting items. Thank you.
Lawyer, and and also I want to apologize to the translator, the people who is translating, because it's difficult to make translation with online, and also that we have a little time and we want to say a lot of things. So now we are going to go to the second round of questions, which now we are going to talk about the conclusions or main takeaways of this project. So why is useful is this project is because we have some knowledge that is interesting to know. And for example, just from the first round, I take one question, that one takeaway, which I think is quite interesting, is that it's not also the law part, it's also the economy, it's also the cultural, that's why we have very different backgrounds, which is quite important to know that in the place that we are in the European Parliament. So if in the future there is some regulation about that, you have to take into account that it's going to be very difficult because we are seeing very different systems. So that's something that, for at least for me, it's also very useful for this project. But now we are going to speak to the authors, to the researchers, main researchers, about this conclusion. So now, Dharma, your time.
Yeah, so for us, I wanted to make 2 points. So one point, as I said initially, we didn't expect any success in collective bargaining in this area. And I think that, and maybe it doesn't sound like a big success if we get 10 days extra paid leave for caring, but this is a country which only introduced 2 days sick leave after COVID, yeah? So 10 days caring leave paid is a feat. And also 7 weeks paid parental leave is a feat. And getting those university professors to acknowledge that their professional staff only has to be on site for 3 days a week is quite a bit. So why was that possible? We think, I said initially, our industrial relations systems is voluntarist and doesn't support this. I need now to modify that, because from 2015 we have seen consolidations of changes, and on the one hand, under voluntarism, collective agreements are not binding, they must be implemented in the contract of work. However, from 2015, there are registered employment agreements whose legal quality was doubted in the past, and which are now legally binding for workers and employers whose organizations are parties. These need to be applied for, and it's a very complex process, but it's possible. Furthermore, in sections where industrial relations are dysfunctional, joint labor committees can be established and which issue employment regulation orders, and that's basically an extended collective agreement, like in France, they all are extended. Thirdly, employers who refuse to engage with the trade union locally or on sectoral basis can be subject to an investigation by the Labour Court and then be ordered to engage. And finally, the Workplace Relation Commission, I mentioned that already, can offer a forum to achieve agreement when negotiation is refused. So this only worked in heavily unionized sectors. What can be done to make it work also in other sectors? And here I think, as we are in the European Parliament, the Minimum Wage Directive comes in, which has been a trigger for a process of reviewing the industrial relations system. So Ireland does not currently reach the 80% coverage. We have a trade union density from 28% down from 60% in the 1980s, and collective bargaining coverage from 43% in 2021 up from 34% in 2017. That's a direct result of the 2015 changes. Now, when it comes to working time, remote work and flexibility, that needs to be negotiated locally. And there's no incentive for local negotiations in the Irish industrial relations systems. So following the Working Time Directive, the government has now started a consultation process, and that consultation process also has a question how to establish legal obligations for negotiation locally. So for us, this is very important. And if this Working Time Directive falls in the next few months before the Court of Justice, then the European Parliament should be thinking about at least the collective bargaining part to put it into perfect. And I think that can be done legally. On another note, the advantages of our model of what has been achieved was remote working and flexibility. I think in some of the papers it said that's because industrial relations are so weak. I think that's not only the thing, it's also because in the specific context of Ireland, with the housing crisis and really long commutes, it's something workers need. And it has especially good for workers who feel they must prioritize care work, many women, and those whose disability lets them suffer from long commutes. Hybrid work has allowed those groups of workers to maintain full-time employment and full pay when they would have felt compelled to reduce the working time if they hadn't been able to work remotely. And there's another plea perhaps for the European legislation. Next to collective bargaining strategies, we also need a regulatory framework which enables remote work, also remote work across borders. And that's another thing which perhaps also the EU level need to consider, because at the moment it's very difficult to allow remote work across borders. So that's my two takeaways, and I hope they were a little bit interesting for this level. Thank you.
Yes, very interesting. So geography is also important. And now, Professor Ramos.
Thank you. I would like to tell you a bit on this conclusion about focusing on some of the case studies that we have and the conclusion that we have reached on that. And I'm not going to tell you all the 4 case studies, but for example, in France, I think it's interesting that apart from the overall picture that I have told you about the ovary laws and the strong legislation trying to promote this reduction of working time, there has been also some attempt very much focused also on pilots to reduce the working time to 4-day working week. And we have looked at one case study on in particular regarding the public administrations, public workers working for the Métropole in Lyon, and also ministry civil servants that are working for the ministries, the several ministries in France, in the area of Paris, in Ile-de-France. There they have implemented these projects. It has been done by the Direction General on Administration and Civil Servants, and it has been done without agreement with the trade unions. The trade union has been informed. They are informed on the result of the project, but they are very reluctant on this particular pilot. Why are they reluctant on this particular pilot? I think when you apply this kind of policies, you also need to consider that you need to do that on a voluntary basis, and that was the case. But then most of the workers that could join this for 4-day working week pilot, they decided not to do it. The take-up was much more reduced than expected, and one of the drawbacks of the system was that this reduction was not accompanied by a reduction on working hours. They still needed to work in the 4 weeks 35 hours per week. And according to the unions, the people who I interviewed, they were against this kind of system. It was not coupled with a reduction of working time to 30 or maximum 32 hours per week. Why? Because that could be, from their point of view, clashing with the French and the EU legislation regarding maximum working time. And it could be problematic from the point of view of health and safety at work, because it means an intensification of work. You need to do the same amount of work in a shorter period of time, and that can lead to work-related stress, especially because this choice of joining the project meant that they were reducing the number of RTTs, which means reduction of temps de travail, days of compensation, rest for overtime. So the unions are not particularly happy with this kind of pilot. So when you need to implement this kind of pilot, it has to be accompanied also by a reduction of the maximum working week. Otherwise, it's problematic from that point of view, from the point of view that this means an intensification of work. And about the Netherlands, I also would like to mention one of the case studies and our conclusion on that one. I mentioned that there is this legislation of flexible working, which allows you to ask for a reduction of working time. But apart from that, I also told you that there are several measures that can be negotiated in collective agreement, and that is being done regularly. One of the cases that we have looked at, in the case of the Netherlands, is also a reduction to 4 days working week for employees over the age of 55. And that has been negotiated in the collective agreement of the construction sector. And it's implemented in that sector, and it's meant for workers of a certain age that are working in a very physically demanding profession. And also some of them started working quite young, so they have been working for a very long period, and many of them at that age, they have already developed some sort of complaint. So it's a way of reducing the number of working days with a small reduction in pay. They work 80% of the regular working week, they earn 90% of the salary, and they build 100% of the occupational pension rights. So it's a good system, no, for the aging population in a very demanding, hazardous sector to combine the situation of a certain group of workers. It's not for all workers, it's for employees over the age of 55. And unions are quite satisfied about negotiating these kind of measures for this kind of sectors. The employees seems to be satisfied with it. The only issue here was when we conducted the interviews is that the FNFE representative, they said they would like to have more transparency and more information on how the scheme is actually working. Why? Because the employers are not informing the union how many employees are taking this possibility. They only arrange this with the tax office. But they say, yeah, when we need to evaluate for the next negotiation round, then we don't have enough information to know if this is actually a measure that is quite popular and is working well and is successful. And apart from that, general conclusions on my case studies that in both countries, what we see is that there is a commitment from the government also to promote flexible working possibilities for balancing, that help workers balancing professional and personal life, but they are doing that through very different mechanisms. And I think collective bargaining in both countries plays a crucial role in this kind of arrangements. And that also, one very interesting conclusion was that in both countries during the rounds of interviews, we heard that the COVID-19 crisis has also got a major impact on the organization of work and flexible arrangements regarding working time. And that there is a sort of perception from the employee side that they have a sort of right to working time flexibility and hybrid work when the kind of work performance allows that to happen. So that I heard it from some of the case study interviews in France and also in the Netherlands. So I think that was really a shift from the employee side to think that this is kind of my right for my employer to try to adapt to a flexible working scheme if that is allowed by the kind of work that I am performing. And then I finish with my...
Thank you very much. And now we go to Professor Van Gerven.
Yes, thank you. So in Finland, of course, we have had our previous Prime Minister was talking about or set out this idea of reducing working time and having 4-day week. But that hasn't resonated in the current discussions. So it's one of these discussions that seems to come up in every 7 years or something like that. It's like the basic income that we have these ongoing debates. And also, of course, for our sector that we looked at, so the HoReCa and the service sector. So basically, you don't talk much about reducing working times. There is some discussion of involuntary working times, so in the sense that people have, they are involuntary working part-time, not having sufficient hours, and in some cases even being forced to work a couple of jobs in order to make the living, especially now that our government is cutting the benefits, social security benefits quite harshly. So it has led that people are really kind of pushed to work more in different jobs in this sector, and that also, of course, leads to heavy burden on them. Actually, they talked much more about overtime, working much more than basically what they should, in the sense, especially in the healthcare sector, social and healthcare, of course, being characterized by very heavy lack of staff and very intense work. So it's more about the question of, do you actually work enough in order to make the living? And I think this is also an important point that we should take into account, that even though we have regulation combined with collective agreements, we need these kind of inbuilt safeguards so that this work, flexible work, doesn't become an exploitation, and we must make sure that there is a role for, of course, for collective agreements. And we heard that also in the interviews, that we need to have this flexibility in providing work, both from the employer and employees' interest, but really this flexibility should not be as a kind of a cost for the well-being of the workers. And also the question of decent jobs and being paid sufficiently are really, I think, burning issues here. So we need legislation to structure the flexibility, to set clear boundaries and expectations, and that they actually, which is one of the biggest problems in what we heard, is how to have predictable and sustainable working conditions. So in that sense, we should make sure that we don't fill in work arrangements that basically are like employer-driven tools to cost cut or control labor. We need collective bargaining mechanisms to counterbalance these things. And in that sense, we should not, good working conditions, decent pay, decent jobs, especially in this sector, are extremely important in order to make work pay for the people that are doing it.
Thank you very much. And now, Professor Hungler.
Thank you very much. I think from Hungary we have 3 key takeaways. One is that the beneficiaries of those innovative schemes are those white-collar employees who work for wealthy multinational companies in sectors where they can leverage on labor shortage. So, and actually the male-dominated sector. So these are the IT professionals. And unfortunately, blue-collar workers are excluded from these schemes. I think that was a sad example. In one of the companies, the blue-collar workers were heavily unionized, yet in their job scopes, innovative working time methods or otherwise flexibility was not possible to introduce. Also, I think there's like no chance to have any schemes similar to those in healthcare sector or educational sector to make more benefit for female employees. So that's one thing. The second thing is that companies, especially in those sectors, especially when it comes to IT professionals, they are in great need to retain their talent. So they do the best, whatever they can do to keep Hungarian professionals in Hungary, because especially IT sector is very mobile. And I think we could see that the most successful models for flexibility or innovative models combine temporal and geographic flexibility. So I think the two goes hand in hand. And I'm not necessarily talking about home office things, but flexibility at least within the European Union. So I think the vacation scheme was a very good example for that. And third, I think, maybe I shouldn't say that, but I totally gave up on collective bargaining in Hungary. I don't think social dialogue would ever revive, at least as long as we have the current government in power, or any other governments actually. So I think that it's not really working in Hungary, or I would rather say in most post-socialist countries. But on the other hand, to say something positive at the end, I think these models, what we could see from these three companies we examined, is like similar to like generic medicine. So the expensive experiments were made by those companies. They learn from each other. We also have the failed example of the third 4-day working week model from the Hungarian telecom companies. So they know what is working, what is not working, and the model is there, so it's already developed. So it's going to be much cheaper for other companies to learn from these models and adopt to their own needs. So I think the hope is there that sooner or later, at least to some sectors, it's going to be more widespread than these three examples we found, choose whatever, for this research project. So I think that could be a hope for everyone who is seeking for flexibility and innovation at their workplace. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, Pablo, is your turn.
Gracias. En el caso español, retomando donde lo dejaba, la práctica y la legislación.
So that's what I said earlier. Practice and negotiation the legal analysis does not allow us how to frame these innovative practices. Collective bargaining in enterprises has quite a lead way because they can try to bypass sectorial convention when it comes to or they cannot when it comes to the working time. The question is not about negotiating or not. Improvement work when it is improvement for the workers, for their advantage, when it is not a new reshifting of the time, a new reaffectation of working time. You may think it is easier in large companies because you have more representations of workers and pilot project could be carried out. In which we established to have mandatory system with very few flexibility. Results are not good. But in smaller sectors, in smaller companies, in more technological companies, where the presence on site of workers is not necessary, we can have positive results. We can reduce working time. Still, the efforts should be a joint effort. These measures only work when working time reduction doesn't lead to wage reduction, salary reduction, because you have to take into account the social and economic reality of the place. In Spain, salaries are not very high. So if you reduce working time and reduce the salaries, this will not be accepted by the workers. So we do need some balance. The enterprises should innovate while preserving the working conditions. We had some very good casing. There was an IT company that established a 4 days working week with slightly longer days. But it was a decision made by the company itself. It was accepted during the collective bargaining and it is now applied. It's been applied for 5 years, and it led to salary increases higher than what we can see on average in the sector and in the country. And there was also a growth of the number of employees. And this company was bought by a foreign multinational company. So then we can say that it worked. The sales sector, we could also reduce working time, but there you need the workers' collaboration, because you need to reduce working time as well as satisfying the productivity need of the company. Therefore, the case studies in Spain show us that it is not the company or the negotiations that foster a success for working time reduction, but that you need some cooperation of social partners. And this is not a decision to be applied unilaterally. There are very promising pilot projects, but the conclusions are not always positive. You have positive measures because you have here pioneer enterprises. They attract talents and they improve the working conditions. If the working atmosphere or if my working conditions are better than my neighbors, then I will feel committed and I will commit to increasing the productivity. It is a positive impact. It's not an impact that is seen everywhere, and that can depend on the sector. The conclusions are the following. In the Spanish system, can we apply collective bargaining is useful but not necessary. You need a framework, and we can see positive impact because these are pioneer companies, and this gives us some good brand image, some very interesting brand image that can attract talents. Thank you.
Presenters, because they comply with the time slots, which is I think it's very good. And also I want to congratulate all them, because I think it's very difficult to concentrate all the information in that short slot. So I think it's been a very, very interesting table. And now we have time for 1 or 2 questions if someone wants to ask something about these case studies, about the conclusions. Well, as I said, there is a lot of information, and the good thing, now we have a question. Perfect.
Thank you very much. It was very interesting. It's for the Irish examination. I'm just wondering, did you consider looking at the reduction in working hours in the public service in 2023? I know it was a rollback from austerity, but it seems like a big project.
Yeah, that's we looked into what has been achieved by negotiations at workplace level. because we see, if we look, and of course, it's an important context of the Irish case study that in the higher education sector and also in the rest of the public service, but especially in the higher education sector, there used to be a 32-hour work week, which offered itself for a 4-day week. And that's also the reason why Forza and SIPTU had been campaigning for a 4-day week before the crisis. And then with the crisis, working hour increased, and that idea got out of the backtrack. So we have come back, not to 32 hours, I think, yeah, but to lower hours than 48, which is good. And that maybe that could have allowed for more flexibility. What I think also for the 2023 and 2024 collective bargaining was that we now have principles that at workplace level, flexible working and remote working should be allowed, but there's no mechanism in those public sector agreements how to achieve that in detail. Yeah? So and that's why we didn't very much looked at it. What we wanted to see is what can you achieve in detail and what can trade unions in the current Irish system achieve in detail. And we were positively surprised that it is possible. And I think it's a shortcoming of that public sector agreement that there's a bit of politicking around this remote and flexible, but no specific steps how you can actually achieve that at your workplace.
Thank you very much. There is another question there. Okay.
Yes, hello, Birte Dedden of Uni Europa here in Brussels. I just have a question regarding the example from France and also Spain that was mentioned. Something comes back actually when you talk about working time reduction. The problem that I also see, and you mentioned it, is a compressed working week. And I think I would like to just generally ask, in the other case studies, has it been an issue? Because from the perspective, for instance, of Belgian trade unionism, we have here also the opportunity, legally speaking, to go for a 4-day work week, but it's also a reluctance from the trade union part, because it just means you have to put your full working load into a compressed working week. And that is not exactly what we need, because then you see rather a detrimental effect on safety and health. So my question would be, was that only in your case study, or would that be something that occurs everywhere? Did you get any comments around that? Is there any collective agreement around that tries to tackle that? So I would be interested in that. Thank you.
That is a great question. Actually, I wanted to ask the same, so thank you. And there is because I prefer to pick a round of questions. Someone else, do you want to ask something? Yeah? Go ahead.
I just have one small question to all of us, actually, to you and to all of us. Talking about working time, as being defined as time you're at the disposal of your employer, has there been any debate on what that means? Because apart from the waiting time and those kind of issues, the time that I'm just on my phone, am I at the disposal of my employer or not? Because that also affects the debate and definitely the issue of flexibility which you're counting. I'll make it clear, when we're talking about the right to deconnection, I'm always thinking, why do I not have a right to deconnect during work from my private life? That would help me to concentrate. If you understand what I mean. And that's, I mean, has somebody been discussing that? Because I would love. Yeah.
I think that is called divorce, but.
You cannot divorce your kids.
Yeah, that's true. That's abandonment. Okay, now very interesting question also. So now about the workload.
Yeah. In France, I interviewed someone from Interco. That is a union mainly for the public sector employees. It was quite clear she was very, very reluctant on the pilot implemented in the Métropole of Lyon and the one that is still taking place for 1 year pilot in Ile-de-France. And the focus was especially what you said. They are extremely worried about the intensification of work, especially because one of the conditions is that they need to renounce this collectively agreed RTTs, that is a sort of compensation rest time days. And they even considered she was not a lawyer, but from the legal office of the unions, they were saying, yeah, this could clash also with the rules on the minimum resting periods of the directive. Yeah. So I think it has to be rethink. We need to rethink this. If you apply that, it has to be with a reduction of the maximum weekly working time. Because otherwise it will lead to problems, to work-related stress for sure. If you try to do the same that you were doing in 5 days, in 4 days, especially in areas like Lyon and Ile-de-France, that you also have a very long commuting time, because most people is not living in the center of Paris, is living in the suburbs, you have a problem, you know? And so I think this is exportable to any case in any country that they want to implement this. I haven't seen any of this in the Netherlands, because in the Netherlands there is this culture of part-time work. So they do what they need to do. They are quite efficient, apparently, because the productivity is quite high. I am also afraid that the productivity is not as real as it is. I think there is a small overtime that is never counted, but because the salaries are very high, people are willing to give for free these couple of hours per week. That is a feeling. There is no research on that, you know. But I have lived there for nearly 20 years. I got this feeling, you know. But the Netherlands is a very special case. But I think what our findings for France, I think, are exportable to other cases of pilots. And this was the position of someone of the unions who was following that dossier, and I have read the position of the other union, CGT, that is the biggest one in France, and it's exactly the same. So I think the point of view of the union, the standpoint on this, is quite good. They are not against this pilot. They are going against this pilot. This means intensification of work. Yeah.
And someone wants to pick the question about the divorce?
I don't think it's about divorce.
I was divorced too.
If somebody else is more experienced in divorce,
So actually, we have some academic discussion on that, especially your example is a good one for that. But eventually, like, working time is a binary model. So if you work, it's working time. If you do not work, it's rest time. So there's no overlap. And I mean, not personally me, but fellow academics try to figure out how could that be tackled, this problem. And there were like many funny models, but none of them looked sustainable. So I think it's still up to the individual employee to discipline herself and say that, okay, I'm not replying to the headmaster's email during working hours, and I'm not picking up a call from work when I'm cooking dinner, but actually you do. So that's digital detox what you need.
Thank you very much. So, well,
may I say something else on divorce? Yep, or on the non-divorce? So it gives me the opportunity to say that, first of all, the 4-day week only works if you get 32 hours weeks as well. Yeah, but even within that, you will then may still have intensification of the work at the workplace due to internationalization or interregionalization. That's what you're talking about. You want to do some conceptual work, but at the same time, you have to respond to different requests on a short-term basis, often from different time zones. And that's actually a new field for which collective bargaining hasn't picked up yet properly, to allow concentration time at work, blocking conceptual time, and then allowing intensive communication times in other times, and to reduce expectations of response. For example, 48 hours response time could be to emails and calls, could be something which is worthwhile going for in collective bargaining as well. It's just a few ideas.
Okay. Yeah, very short.
Yes, very short. I think also the point that you made respect to the traveling, the commuting time. I mean, we need a discussion what is working time. So I think you are hitting the nail in the head. So in that sense, they are, especially in the low-paid sector, these are really, really crucial issues that we should have better grasp.
Completely agree. It's a legal question. So, okay. Well, thank you very much. I think it's very, very interesting. Please, big applause for all the presenters. Now the ebook presentation.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is the moment you've all been waiting for. We're at the end of the panel sessions, which were obviously really interesting. I also want once again to thank and congratulate the whole team, especially Annabelle and Munoz, for the great lead of this project, which has led to enormous outcomes. So I have learned a lot during this day, and I think I'm not the only one. I hope that also concerns you, that you have learned a lot about working time and innovative cases on working time reduction, and flexible working time arrangements in Europe. So thank you. Thanks also to everybody who organized this. It has been splendid, it has been well done. Thank you very much. Now we come to the special issue. There is an e-book from this conference. And not only from this conference, actually from the whole research project, to be honest. And the e-book is something really special because it brings together the case studies with an introduction by Francisco, and then afterwards a sort of summary of what has been done by Annabelle and some collaborators from the University Carlos III, from Madrid. It is a great book to read, I can tell you. I haven't read it entirely. I've read parts of it, to be honest, during the day because I got it this morning. But it's a great book to read. Why? Because it brings together the new ideas which have been shortly mentioned by the previous panel, the outcome of the research, and it learns you that from a different background, from different angles, all EU countries concerned are trying to tackle the issue of how do we deal with working time in a new era. What is important and what I really like is that you also search for a solution for social dialogue. It doesn't always work out as you want to. We have sorry to say it, we have the example of Hungary where it's not easy, that's what I understood. We have the example of Ireland where it's not always easy, let's call it that way. But for others, I mean, like France, which Nuria has done, 2 countries, like France, you can see that different levels, company agreements, fitting with sectoral agreements, fitting with a national act, it can work out to a reduction of working time. Also in Spain, you see a lot of collective bargaining and a lot of collective bargaining agreements taking place, as it is the case for Finland, where you have quite a lot of collective bargaining. So that's really interesting to read. The final one was actually, the remark I had is also, and I have brought it up, so I was too early, but it's nice to see that in the conclusions, the issue of working time and flexible working is also questioned in general. What is it? How do we proceed? How do we get to new information? So I can only congratulate the whole team for the work and advise you all to read the e-book, which will be presented now, which will be available, I guess, on the website in the next days. Once again, congratulations to the whole team, and it's really an honor that I can present that e-book to all of you, and please read it. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much, Alexander. Well, for me, Belgium is my second house, no? Because when I visit Belgium, and in special Ghent, no, your university, I feel very, very, very well. Thank you so much, everyone, to attend our conference. on-site and online, because we have 150 people from different countries online, Europe, outside Europe, in different countries. And thank you so much, to attend our conference. And we close the conference only saying, well, thank you so much, and we hope you enjoy with our research. We continue to work, no? And congratulations, the Innova working team, no? Because your collaborative work is essential, no? To carry out this objective. Thank you, and we close the seminar. Thank you.